started, Stephen?
I think we can do that.
Okay, so let's call the regular meeting of the Harbor Commission to order. Could I get a roll call, please?
All right, as I always do, I'll call you in the order I see you on my screen. Commissioner Carlson.
Present.
There's a lot of people on my screen. Commissioner Callahan.
Present.
Commissioner Bauer.
Here.
Commissioner Walters.
Here.
Commissioner Krazan.
Here.
Chair Light.
Here.
And I believe Commissioner Kilroy is absent. And I think that's everybody. Did I call everyone? Okay, so you have commissioners with one commissioner absent right now.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, going to item B1, Eleanor, you're going to administer the oath of office to those of us who are new appointees.
Yeah, so the one that's an appointee is Jim Light. So you'll be the one to do the oath of office. So if you can please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Jim Light,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well
and that I will well,
and faithfully discharge
I'm sorry,
and faithfully discharge
and faithfully discharge
the duties upon
the duties upon
which I'm about to enter.
which I'm about to enter.
Okay, great. So congratulations. And
Congratulations.
I will be mailing out a certificate, and I'll just need you to sign it and then send back the copy to our department. We'll give you a self-addressed envelope. So
Okay, thank you very much.
And so, and Vicki, I assume you understand, I guess, since there's no appointment for your seat, so to speak, you still carry on.
Right.
I just wanted to clarify that. I don't know if the mayor had spoken to you.
Yes, he had.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. And then I think that's it. So thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. So we now, with the new commissioner sworn in, we have to do a second roll call. So we'll take roll call once again. But it'll be interesting because technically Chair Light is the new commissioner. But okay, we'll do it this way. We'll go
Right.
Carlson. Commissioner Carlson.
Present.
Commissioner Callahan.
Present.
Commissioner Bauer.
Here.
Commissioner Walters.
Here.
Commissioner Krazan.
Here.
And Chair Light.
Here,
All right, I think we have taken care of our administrative duties in terms of new commission appointees. We are at item C on your agenda, Chair Light.
okay, salute to the flag. Roger, could you lead us in the salute to the flag?
Sure. Place your right hand over your heart and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America.
And
to the republic for which it stands,
One nation
under God,
Indivisible.
with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Okay, let's see, item D is approve the order of the agenda. I think, Stephen, you're gonna pull L4 because the link was broken.
Yeah, my apologies, commissioners. So we sent you your agenda packet, which was complete and had all of the items in it. We were able to verify that. However, the agenda online shows all of the items as well, but one of the links for the item for the sea level rise, L4, when you click the link, it doesn't take you to our normal page that shows you the opportunity to download the administrative report, the attachments that are associated with it. And so we got some comments from the public about not being able to access that particular item. And so we think it would be best if we were to pull that item from the agenda this evening and carry it over to your meeting that will be held on November 8th, since the public hasn't had a chance to review those materials. So that would be my suggestion to you related to the order of the agenda.
Okay, so I'll make that motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, I see Vicky. Vicky raised her hand, so we'll take Vicky. Is anybody opposed to that? Okay, so we will pull L4 and move it to next month's agenda. Stephen, I had a question. I don't know if I can see who signed up to talk on what, but between L1 and L3, is there a bunch of speakers, wanting to address either of those items?
So let me grab my agenda here. So I got multiple screens. So L1, there will be people speaking on L1. You have a couple of people on your screen as panelists. One of them is Ken Frank, who is with the Sport Fishing Association of California. So he's going to make a short presentation for you. My understanding, and that's why I was asking Eleanor at the beginning of the meeting, was there were some potential attendees that wanted to speak on that matter. Or I don't see them in our waiting room wanting to speak on that matter yet, but that doesn't mean that they might still show up. But for now, I have no attendees. So it would be the presentation and then your opportunity to ask questions. My understanding was there were going to be, potentially 3 or 4 different people who wanted to attend the meeting and speak on that issue. But so far, I don't see them logged in yet. I am going to check my email, and I don't have any emails from anyone saying they're having a challenge logging in. I'll ask Elizabeth or Lori if they've gotten any emails for people challenged to get in. Doesn't sound like it.
Yes, Director Pratt, we're looking into getting Jacob Marino able to connect. So,
Okay.
On which item?
So that would be for item L1. And then L2 is your quarterly public safety report. You have representatives from the police department and the fire department here to speak to that item as well. So those are the 2 items that have participation. The outdoor dining program, you heard Eleanor reference Rochelle possibly wanting to log in and speak on that item. Again, we don't see her in the attendee list, so we're trying to determine if we're having an issue with people who are trying to log in as attendees. But we do know of potentially 1 speaker on that item as well. So what we could do is once you get to that agenda item, so we still have to, approve through the blue folder and the consent calendar. But once we get to item L1, we could certainly turn it over, have the presentation, and hopefully between now and then we can get the attendees on board. They're familiar with the issue. I think they can speak to it even if they happen to pop in a couple minutes late. So your choice.
Chair Light, I was thinking if we moved L2 up ahead of L1, that would give everybody time to get logged in, and it would also dismiss our police and fire department to go back to their duties.
I'll take that as a motion. Any second to that? Well, I'll second it. Any discussion on the item or anybody have any objection to moving L2 first? Okay, so let's go L2, then we'll go into L1 and L3.
And I apologize, I'm multitasking because I just got an email from Rochelle. So,
Okay.
Okay.
apologies.
I move to approve the order of agenda as we have rearranged it.
I second it.
Sounds like she got it. Okay, perfect.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so that's the order we'll go in.
All right, so we'll do L2, then L1, and then on to L3 from there. So with that, what I think I will do is ask Division Chief Jason May. Jason, you want to power up and then take us through your...
Wait a minute, we've got some other items first.
Oh, my apologies. I'm sorry. I forgot you had... Almost there, Jason. I apologize.
Sounds good. I was all ready.
Okay, is there any blue folder items or additional backup materials?
There are no blue folder items tonight. Thank you.
Okay, consent calendar, we've got 2 items. Does anybody want to pull either of the items? I take that as a no. Any member of the public wish to pull any of the consent calendar items? That's the minutes and the approval of the affidavit of posting.
I'm not aware of any members of the public who are here to speak on those. Thank you.
Okay, so can we approve, can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar items?
I had one comment on the minutes, but it's a tiny thing. But
So then you want to pull it?
yeah, for just a second.
Okay,
Well,
so
maybe it's such a tiny thing, but it just showed me getting at the meeting at like 7:30 or something. But I actually was at the meeting. I just couldn't comment because I didn't have my Zoom link. I don't know if that matters.
I have you down as attending the meeting. I can look at the packet here. Let me just scroll down.
Yeah, it just shows.
I did make an agenda. I did make a edit to that. I see what you're saying. It said arrived at 6:50 p.m.
Yeah.
What you're saying is you were actually there at the start of the meeting?
Correct. I just couldn't say present because I wasn't on the Zoom link for panelists.
Understood. So maybe with that, we can make that edit. So maybe the motion as amended?
Yeah, so the motion is to approve them with the minor amendment as recommended by Commissioner Bauer. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Okay, Leslie seconded it. Anybody opposed? I'm looking for a show of hands. I see none.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Not opposed.
Okay, I see. So that's item F going to, there is no excluded consent calendar items. Any public participation on non-agenda items? Did you receive any comments?
I'm checking your e-comments right now.
Or emails?
I did not receive any emails, and you do not have any e-comments on non-agenda items.
Okay, is anybody who's online right now, you want to speak to non-agenda items?
So Jacob, you're the only attendee. If you're here to speak on a non-agenda item, you can raise your hands, but I'm relatively certain he's here for L1.
Okay, we have Kenneth too, right?
Yeah, Ken's actually making a presentation on L1 as well.
Okay. Okay, so ex parte, there's no public hearings, so ex parte doesn't matter. No public hearings, no items continued from the previous agenda. So now going to items for discussion and over to L2, the quarterly public safety report.
Okay, I know I jumped the gun. Apologies, Chair and members of the commission, but as you know, we do a quarterly public safety report. We have representatives from the fire department and from PD here. So I think we'll start with fire from Division Chief Jason May, and then when Jason's complete, we'll turn it over to the police department.
Ooh. Good evening, commissioners. Let me put together a short, much more interesting than watching me speak presentation for you this evening. It's an honor, as always, to be before you this evening. Looking forward to sharing some information about what our Harbor Patrol has been doing the last couple months. And very excited to get to present to you. Both Captain Fasilich and myself are grateful, obviously, to go first in the lineup, kind of warming up for the other presentations tonight. Here are your quarterly stats for your Harbor Patrol. That's our Harbor Patrol actually out assisting Baywatch Redondo with a medical patient that was taken off of a boat there. As you see in our agenda packet, we have our kind of overall stats. I hit the greatest hits for you on this short slideshow, but we responded to 57 maydays over the past 3 months, 35 medical emergencies in the harbor area. We had, I think, a total of, I don't have the stats before, several illegal moorings, I think a total of 8 in non-dispatched calls. Marine enforcement, the most common one was people swimming off of their stand-up paddleboards. We did have, and including one last Sunday or yesterday, 2 boat concerts in the harbor during the last 3 months for a total of 271 calls in the last couple months. The most significant event in the harbor area, which was a collaborative effort between the police department, public works, and ourselves, was Beach Life. I'm gonna apologize for the contrast on this. It's a wonderful shot of our harbor, but it's kind of hard to read the slides. So I kind of put this together right before the meeting, so I apologize. In terms of the harbor and this commission, and kind of what you would probably be the most concerned about was the marine exclusion area, which was a buoy line run from basically just outside of Samba all the way over to Joe's Crab Shack. And that was to provide a safety zone basically for the attendants inside the venue from anybody that wanted to come and do some evil, bad things to the people inside the venue. That was put up Thursday night and was brought down Sunday evening. It was posted to have an alternative means of entering the water over by the boat hoist and or one of the docks over in Basin 3. While the small boat launch was closed. I think we all saw the nice LED boat line that was out there that helped us identify that exclusion area. It was great. It's actually a nice area for the stand-up paddlers and the paddlers to go out, kind of hang on that buoy. They could listen to some music. It kept us clear of a nice, safe area for people inside the venue that had been vetted prior to their entry. So that was a nice addition. There was an anchored area along the breakwater for people to drop anchor and listen to music if they did on the other side of the navigation channel. We did have one significant water-related call down there. I'm sure Captain Fusilich will speak to this as well. But we had somebody try to sneak into the venue along the rocks, basically beneath the old sport fishing pier. The police department tried to cooperate with that individual, get him to exit the area. He was non-cooperative. They attempted to apprehend him. At that point, he chose to enter the water. When he entered the water, the Marine Enforcement Unit, Baywatch Redondo, and the Harbor Patrol Unit basically made sure the individual stayed safe and then attempted to coax him back onto a boat to get him to be removed from the area. And eventually they talked him into getting on the boat, but there was a significant amount of work involved in that on Sunday evening. But outside of that, and that was managed on the part of the Marine Enforcement Unit, Baywatch Redondo, and our unit. But outside of that, it was pretty quiet for our Harbor Patrol activities down there. In terms of just general stuff going on with the fire department, Chief Kaufman, the police chief, and Chief Castro, who's a retired operations chief from the LA City Fire Department, they're delivering their assessment of the fire department here this month. So our council should be getting that sometimes towards the later of the month. And there are potential alternatives for the Harbor Patrol going into the future. I believe there's a handful of options, starting with the status quo of our organization, moving forward to several different models for deployment. That's what's been going on with us over the last quarter. I'm sure you have a large number of questions for me, given the multitude of issues that have come up outside of the harbor, whether it's Hyperion sewage leaks or oil spills or anything like that. I'd be happy to answer those questions for you if you have any.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with some questions. The individual who broke through your exclusion zone, did he get charged with anything, or she?
I can't answer that question specifically. The Marine Enforcement Unit was responsible for assisting them. Again, we pulled the individual out of the water, but the Marine Enforcement may have followed up with, I believe he was taken into custody and potentially charged with something. So I'm sure Captain Fusilich will cover that in his presentation, or maybe he wants to answer that right now. Sorry, Mario, I didn't see you there.
Not a problem. Thank you. Good evening, you guys. My name is Mario Fislich. I'm the patrol captain of operations. So there's 2 Mario Fisliches on here. Corey King is the better looking one of the 2. So that's Lieutenant King. He's there in the office, and he's in charge of our peer unit. And but yes, so that gentleman, he was arrested, and my understanding was he was arrested for basically being intoxicated. I'm not quite sure if he was charged for any other type of violations, but that's probably the majority of the reason why he was uncooperative, unwilling to get onto the boats. He decided to go for a swim, and he was arrested for being drunk in public. That was definitely one charge.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, jumping to some other topics. You talked about the boat concert. Any problems with the recent boat concert?
No, we're trying to blend a variety of different needs in the harbor area, but in general, all of the boaters are very cooperative with any of our enforcement activities. Our Harbor Patrol and the Marine Enforcement Unit collaboratively help kind of make sure everybody stays out of the navigation lanes, that people aren't side tying, that the swimming is really limited inside that venue. Our main concern is having access to the boats there. And if somebody was injured or had a medical emergency, that we'd be able to get to them and provide care. So in general, there's a lot of prevention going on where there's discussions with boaters, but there was no citations, I believe, at either event, but there was a lot of proactive work on the part of our Marine Enforcement Unit and the Harbor Patrol boat. So. But in
Okay,
general,
thank
the
you.
tenants are very cooperative. It's a good group down there. So.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. We seem to have gone from, we had one derelict boat and it seems like right after you towed that one away, 2 more came in. So are we developing a process for taking care of derelict boats?
So there is a process to remove derelict boats. And there are actually a couple boats that are in this process down at the harbor. One of the challenges for that process is the cost of removing those boats. And there's a couple different venues that we've gone down before, but we will work collaboratively. The Harbor Patrol will work collaboratively with the PD unit, and they'll file what's known as a CHP 180 form to take possession of that boat. After given a certain period of time, trying to locate an owner, a responsible party. Once they file that paperwork, just if it was a derelict car out on the street, the city can then take possession of it, tow it over the boatyard, and then we have to actually pay to dispose of that in a way. Which can be very expensive given some types of craft and some of the hazardous materials that are located on those boats. So every attempt is always made to locate a responsible party that can bear the cost of that. And we haven't so far budgeted for the disposal of derelict boats that end up in our harbor. So I'm not sure if that's a perfect answer, but we do have specific municipal code sections that deal with collection of discarded or lost property, including boats. And the process to dispose of them, it's just very expensive sometimes to dispose of the large boats that you see down there. So we're definitely not collecting them, but they have surfaced. So,
Do the owners just pull up and leave them there, or do the marinas move them into the moorings?
It's my understanding that the marinas have their own process for disposing of their boats that are not paying their slip fees. A lot of times those are boats that come into our harbor, then the owners are no longer able to locate them. So I can tell you that the boats that are not being attended to down there are in that process. And somewhere along that line of us disposing of them. We have worked with the sheriff's office up in Marina del Rey, sometimes using grant funds they receive to help dispose of those boats. But again, it's a tremendous cost for the harbor and the city to dispose of some of those boats. So.
How are they mooring there without the Harbor Patrol knowing who it is and how long they're going to be there?
They were there legally moored, and then I believe they leave the premises. I couldn't speak to the specific history of each one of those boats that's been discarded down there, but they make every attempt to find the responsible party because, again, the cost of disposing of those boats. So any boat that pulls up at the moorings is contacted by the Harbor Patrol and then asked to pay mooring fees or leave the harbor. Sometimes they're mechanically disabled. Sometimes we bring them into our harbor because they're stuck out at sea. Their motors don't work. They say they want to come in to make some quick repairs, and then, 6 months later, the boat's still sitting on one of the moorings. So,
well, but it would seem we'd have idea of the skipper.
Correct. Again, nobody makes contact with those moorings without contacting the marina manager. So,
and Chair, just so you know, one of the boats that's currently on a mooring. So we reached out to the mooring operator, our marina operator, and there's currently one boat on a mooring, on one of the city moorings that was moved there from the boatyard. I guess the boatyard operator, our marina manager, that they needed a place to keep the boat while they were waiting for the next appointment at the boatyard. Our marina manager has notified them that they have till the end of the week to get that boat out, or it will go into the Harbor Patrol process. So it's not, perhaps it may look abandoned out there, but I know at least one of them is awaiting its turn at the boatyard for the moment. So that may explain the more recent arrival that you sent me the email about.
Yeah, it's been quite the wait then.
Yeah. So we're aware of that one for sure. And like I said, we're optimistic we'll get that one off the mooring by the end of the week. And hopefully, if not, it'll go into the process that Jason just described to you.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question has to do with the amenities plan subcommittee starts on the 18th. Is anyone from Harbor Patrol attending that?
For the first meeting, we don't have anybody on Harbor Patrol attending that meeting, but we're going to work to see if we can get some representation at a future meeting. The first meeting will probably be a little more of an initial sort of reach out meeting, but we'll talk with them. I think our thought was when we had something a little more concrete that they could respond to, that might be an appropriate invitation for them to attend the meeting.
Well, we certainly want to make sure we're getting their input on where we're putting the boat ramp and how the fishing dock is configured and all of that. We don't want to do like we did with the Center Cal thing where, we kind of ignored the input of the Harbor Patrol.
Understood.
Okay, that's all from me. Thank you. I think Vicki, you had your hand up first. Oh, Roger. Okay, go ahead, Roger.
Okay, thanks.
There you go.
Yeah, battle to see who can get to the mute button first. So thanks for the report. I'm kind of a question for both police and fire, or police and Harbor Patrol. Are you in contact with other harbors to kind of compare notes on harbor activity? Are we seeing more crime than they are? Are we seeing, more dangerous people coming in than other harbors? Just wondering if you have contacts at Marina Del Rey or down in Long Beach in general for, operations and situational awareness.
I can give a quick overview, and Lieutenant King or Captain Fasilich can probably give their end of it. Our Harbor Patrol is in constant communication with other Harbor Patrols across the state. And fortunately for them, they also share that facility with the Baywatch crews, which rotate between Marina Del Rey, Zuma, Malibu, San Pedro. So they're always having contact with that county entity and kind of what's going on in those agencies. From a law enforcement perspective, I can't really speak to that, but I believe that they're always in this collaborative relationship with not only the county, but other Harbor Patrols across the area. So they're getting information just by sharing housing, but they're also kind of always talking to other agencies within the state, staying current on the best practices. My general sentiment is that we are experiencing what most harbors across the state are experiencing. That's a general takeaway.
Kind of a specific question I have is what effect a boat ramp might have for us in the future. I've been thinking a lot about the boat ramp coming, and I want it to come. You might, as you're talking to other safety agencies in other harbors, you might ask them, what percentage of their calls is from issues around a boat ramp, just that much more traffic, that many more people. Boat ramps are challenging, fun to watch if you're not the guy, doing the, backing his truck into the water. And I'm just wondering if we have a long-term staffing need to, make sure we have the staff on either team or both to deal with added issues around a boat ramp. That's my curiosity.
That would be a great question for us to kind of more acutely examine with the sheriff officers that are assigned to Marina Del Rey, because they have a very active boat ramp in Marina Del Rey that's adjacent to their facility there. So that would be a good thing for us to follow. I will task some of our Harbor Patrol officers with following up on that question and then having a better answer for you in the future.
Yeah, it's kind of a long-term question because obviously we're not going to have a boat ramp tomorrow, but if they see that 50% of their calls are, around the boat ramp, that might mean that our calls are about to double and, you might need more staff. Thanks. I had a question on the abandoned vessels. I know that Long Beach sells there at auction, making profit off these things instead of having to pay to get rid of them. Why can't we do that?
That is an option for us, but we have to get in an auction process with those cities. To be honest with you, the two boats that I am aware of, we could try that. That's always the best process if we can get somebody to buy the boats. And that's been sought and maybe looked for with already. But the two boats we have right now are probably not the best. Nobody's going to want them, but we can try it. There's no doubt there. I'd have to actually talk to one of our boat captains down there to get that specifics, but I know that's been looked at.
Okay, thanks.
That helps.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Jim, you're muted.
Yep. Thanks, Roger. Vicki, you're up.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the stand-up paddleboard statistics. They look like they're down from last year. The rules of the road, the PFDs, The only one that's up looks to be swimming and swimming, SU2 swimming. How do we do that?
Well, I think COVID has caused our statistics to do weird things, and I would
Okay.
attribute it to that. And the beach being open again this year in the summer and for a longer period of time. So that's what I would guess that it is. I think it's just COVID's kind of changing our society and we don't really realize it. That's the only different thing about this year versus last year. So if I had to guess.
Because I love the statistics. My last question is, are we actively reviewing voters' cards?
I don't think so. Not right now, but that's something we should be doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's all I have. Thank you very much. We appreciate your work.
Okay, thanks, Vicki. Let's see, Roger, you still have your hand up. Are you done? Okay. I don't see any other hands up, so thank you very much. Appreciate the report and your intent to follow up on some of the questions.
Thank you.
You're on mute, Stephen.
Okay. So what I started to say was appreciate that. I think we still have our PD update, and I'm not sure which gentleman is going to give the update. So whichever one of you is going to speak first, unmute yourself and you're on.
I will do it. Good evening again, Mario Fizlich from Patrol Operations. So Commissioner Carlson, just to add on to your question in regards to our collaborative effort with other agencies, pre-COVID, we did meet actually monthly at the Maritime Center in Long Beach. And at that Maritime Center would be anywhere from Coast Guards to other units up and down the coast, sheriffs. And that way we'd basically be on board and we have open conversations of what's going on in different harbors. Not to say that we've lost all touch because of COVID, we still stay in contact, but that was a regular meeting that we would do on a monthly basis with them. So hopefully that kicks back up again. And for the most part, prior to the biggest issues were, the Panga boats that would come up and where they would go in Orange County, and then, some would end up in PV. And I think they got pretty close to us. So that was the last conversations we've had when we had them. Since then, haven't heard much of that. And those are pretty much just the monthly meetings we're having. Moving forward I apologize. This is my second Harbor Commission meeting. So usually Sergeant Sapien, I believe, is on here. So he does the presentation. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I believe all of you were forwarded the stats. And I'll make sure that next time I have these up for you. So that way, just in case you don't have them in front of you, everyone can see them. I just wanted to point out a few things is that you'll see if you do have them, there's definitely been an increase in self-initiated activities, which is also, reports, citations, and arrests stem from that. And the reason why that has gone up from June, July, and August, because we specifically focused on, zero tolerance. It's busier on the pier. We want to make sure that we're down there and we're controlling the open containers, the drunken publics, the dogs on the pier, the bikes on the pier, the fishing violations, that type of stuff. So there's been a drastic increase, as you can see. It looks like for the month of June, it went up to 137 self-initiated to 238 in July and 212 in August. That's significantly an increase from January, February. You see it's 50s, 60s, and then it looks like in May is in the 40s. So in addition to that, the reason why the numbers are so high, it's not just our peer officers. I make a point during the busy months to deploy our patrol officers to assist down on the pier. So what I have my lieutenants do is on their watches, they will go ahead and dedicate 3-4 hours of their watch, and they would go down to the pier and they would do enforcement on the pier. So it's nice to be able to work with patrol and to get patrol officers down there to help out and, basically show our presence and make sure that we know that we're down there enforcing our pier laws. So there's obviously been a couple of significant incidences on the pier. One was the officer involved shooting that we had on I believe it was the 25th of August. I can't really get into too much details, nor do I really know too much detail. And the reason why I say that is anytime we have an officer involved shooting, LA County Sheriff comes in and they take over the investigation. So we're pretty much left kind of in the dark as well until they complete their investigation. Their investigation is still ongoing. But what I do know, what I could share is that it was an active shooter. What we call is basically an active shooter is what it is. You have an individual that is down at a location, just basically random shooting randomly at individuals. And so we had an active shooter down on the pier. The call came out. At the time, we didn't know it, but we had 2 victims that were hit. Both of them, luckily, it was non-life-threatening injuries. Officers basically deployed. They made contact with the suspect, and the officer involved shooting ensued. At that point in time, the suspect fled, and he fled down towards Horseshoe Beach. And at that point in time, multiple agencies were requested to set up in a containment, because at that point in time, our officers couldn't see where the suspect was. Unknown if he ended up running along the sand towards Captain Kidd's, possibly going south towards Starboard Attitude, Old Tony's, unknown. So it was a pretty big containment, pretty big crime scene. And we did find him. He was down below the rocks and he succumbed to his injuries. So that's all I have on that. We're very fortunate that nobody seriously got hurt in this. Like I said, it was random. I believe that the 2 victims, they didn't know each other. It was just a suspect just firing rounds and hitting 2 innocent individuals. Going forward, we did have the Beach Life Festival. As Battalion Chief May indicated, it was fairly well run. We only had a few arrests, and those arrests were just basically drunk in public. I wouldn't say we had more than probably 4. There's probably just as many medical calls as well. Everyone behaved. It was a great event. We're extremely happy, and we're pleased that people were able to enjoy themselves. I think those were the 2 things that I wanted to talk about. So that's it for my presentation. I'm here to field questions if anybody has any.
Okay, thank you. And I thought we usually get more detailed reports, like the type of arrests and things like that, but so hopefully next time we can see that. What was the time from when you guys received the call on the shooter on the pier to the your first engagement with the individual?
It was interesting because I was actually in the city still. So I heard the call come out, and I drove. I was on my way home, so I was in the Riviera Village. So I turned back around. I drove back towards Torrance Circle, and by the time I got to Torrance Circle, officers were already already engaged with the suspect. So the response was rather quickly. I don't have the exact minutes or seconds that it took to respond, but they were there pretty quickly.
Yeah, I don't know the details, but from what I saw and heard, I'm very impressed with the response from the police department. So I really appreciate that. Just one other minor question. So I think, Beach Life, I love Beach Life Fest. I went to all 3 days again. And I had a great time. Do you guys just look the other way to smoking? And it is a public area and we're not supposed to allow smoking in there. You guys just look the other way? Because that was pretty rampant.
It was, and we do. We're there basically just to make sure that we're keeping the peace. We don't want people breaking down. We did have actually 4 individuals that rushed through the gate off to the side, that got in. We're there more to basically keep the peace in that aspect. We weren't there to be COVID police. We're not there to really initiate the illegal, marijuana usage. We just went in there as a game plan. Hey, let's just keep our eyes open for the safety of everybody, the safety of of everybody who was there. And that was pretty much our focus.
And I agree with your assessment. It's a pretty mellow crowd other than, pot smoke, which I don't have anything against. I just don't want to get contact high. from,
No, I agree. And it's funny you say that is because even me walking by, I have a hard time smelling, but if I can smell it, it's pretty bad. And I remember when I picked up a few cents, I'd look around and I'd see somebody smoking, and all of a sudden they see me and they start putting it out. So if anything being said, hopefully our presence was cut down on some of that usage.
okay, thank you. And Stephen, I think, I don't know if he's announced it, but Alan has put something out. Alan Sanford, the guy kind of organized the whole Beach Life Fest, and he's having an event at On the Rocks on Wednesday night.
Yeah, Wednesday night, it's kind of a community, debrief, if you will, on the Beach Life Festival. And so we had our own internal debriefing that police, fire, the various city departments attended with the event organizer. And I think he's having a similar type of events on Wednesday evening to get feedback from the community about the festival as well. So it's an opportunity for anybody that wants to kind of come and talk with him a little bit about it if they had particular concerns. I think, we didn't hear a lot. I was going to report on this in my director's report, but since it's come up already, I mean, citywide, we didn't have a lot of complaints about the Beach Life Festival. I can tell you in our office, was limited to a small handful of complaints, and almost those were entirely related to the volume on Sunday night and having the Sunday night concert go till 10:30. So, they were literally, those were the kind of the two issues that came up. So when you think about the totality of the festival, that few complaints and kind of focusing on that issue is actually quite good. I think we will be talking with Alan about trying to dial back the hours on Sunday evening. 10:30 seemed like, in retrospect, that might have been a little late for a work night, a school night, kind of for folks to have to go for that period of time. So I think that'll be a question that'll come up. But all in all, from our perspective, really, really well attended. And if folks want to attend the community event, like I said, that'll be Wednesday evening if they're so inclined.
And then we've got an event coming up at Seaside Lagoon for 3 days.
We do. And again, so I'll just kind of mention it now because it was going to be in my director's report. So there's an event called Rocktober that's happening in the Seaside Lagoon. It's a much smaller event contained entirely inside the lagoon. It's primarily a series of cover bands that do various kind of artists, Queen, Aerosmith, you name it. And they'll have, beer and food, but a much smaller type event. But that's going on the 15th, 16th, and 17th.
Are we doing anything, and the reason I'm asking for it now, are we doing anything specific from a public safety perspective for that? Are we having an exclusion zone again, or?
I can't speak to that. I think because it's all pretty well contained inside of the Seaside Lagoon perimeter, that there, it's obviously not the same kind of scope and scale that we're talking about for Beach Life. I don't know if any of the public safety folks are prepared to comment, but.
Well, my being concerned, are we shutting down the hand launch?
I can speak to that very briefly, Commissioner Light. We are not providing the same marine exclusion area. It's a much smaller area of much smaller pool of attendance, about 1,000 at the highest end of attendance versus the close to 10,000 attendance for the Beach Life Festival. So the small boat launch and that we'll call it the west side access to the Seaside Lagoon, that access road is going to be, at least as far as I know, left open. There have been public safety individuals that are going to be assigned to that event specifically to mitigate any sort of incipient stage problems there, whether they're medical in nature or a fight or anything like that. They're also providing their own safety and security services. I will be monitoring the event, and so will Captain Fusilich all 3 days, making sure everything goes to plan down there. It's on a similar scope and magnitude of Lobster Fest, basically, in terms of attendance. So.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Vicky, I apologize. I see your hand up and I've been dominating the conversation. So over to you, Vicky.
You had good points. Thank you, Chair Light. My question was on the second paragraph about monitoring the dogs smoking in open containers on the pier. When I go down there, I have to walk through clouds of smoke to get to a restaurant. And I got to tell you, it's very unappetizing. I know it's against the law. I know you can't be everywhere, but I think if enough tickets were handed out, that word would get around that you can't smoke, or if we had better postings. But it's hard to walk through those billows and clouds of smoke. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll speak on that. I agree. We do go down there, and there's times where the direction is zero tolerance, right? Zero tolerance, that's what it means, zero tolerance. Other times we go down there and it's, hey, this is basically an educational format, and let's educate those that, hey, we can't do this, because a lot of them don't know. And so we don't want to just go down there heavy-handed and start writing everybody citations, but we do get to the point where it is a zero tolerance. We've done enough education, either it be signage, either it be pamphlets passed out, flyers, notes on the pier substation, that type of stuff. But you're right, just like anything else, I always compare it to a speeder, right? You're speeding and you get pulled over, you get a warning, and it's like, okay, as soon as the officer leaves, you're probably lead-footed again and you're speeding again. But you get that citation and it makes you think twice, and then you slow down. And sometimes that's what it takes.
So do you think we need better signage?
I don't know exactly what the signage is down there currently. I just don't know. I'm not the type that likes to infiltrate with signage everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what it looks like down there right now, but we could definitely continue doing some more zero tolerance enforcement, and like you said, hopefully the word gets out on that aspect of it.
Okay, thank you very much. You guys do a hard job, and we really appreciate it. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Tom, I see your hand up.
Once again, I got to unmute. Thank you so much for that report. Excellent. And I'm all in favor of the zero tolerance. Sometimes, especially late at night, it gets it sometimes is a little worrisome down there. But my question we were talking to a number of the businesses down there and about the outdoor dining program. And a number of them talked about their little areas being vandalized at night, which brought up this idea of you have a police substation down there, but it's closed. Is there any thoughts to reopening that and remanning that?
Budget.
Yeah, good question. Yes, there has been talks in doing that. So I know the chief is currently in discussions with that to reopening it, and not just with police presence, but also we used to have, we call a CSO2 down there. We used to have some CSU personnel down there as well, which is our community engagement group. So yeah, the talks is to get that manned as much as we could. Being 24/7, I'm not quite sure we're going to get to that point, but definitely to man it more hours than we currently do.
Well, thank you so much. And has there ever been thought of having cameras and some, obviously there's going to take some budget, but cameras and then monitors up in that substation as well, even if it's recording when there's nobody there?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually one camera there now that is on top of the pier sub. As you guys know, you could go online and you can see the waves and the water, but that's more for just the view of the beach. So we are in talks with a camera company that we did a trial run at our Beach Life Festival, and it worked out fairly well. And what this system is basically it has a modem that they pay for the modem. It's only like $100 or $200. Either the business pay for it, or we could even donate them to the businesses. And what they do is they basically attach that modem onto their system, and that allows us the opportunity to get their live feed and their recordings at our station. So we're looking to get that, and hopefully not just on the pier, but also throughout the city. Any company or any business that wants to participate, it's basically a $125 modem, I believe. It attaches to their system, and we automatically get feed at the police department. So we're looking to do that, and definitely that would be utilized on the pier as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. And just one follow-up, but there's no, right now we don't really have there's no established date for when that substation gets manned or anything like that.
Correct. I mean, currently right now we have our pier officers that are down there. They're down there now from 11 to 11:30, so 11 in the morning to 11:30. The hours have changed now that summer is pretty much almost behind us. And yeah, so it's pretty much 11 to 11:30. But they're not always in there, as you well know. They're out on the boat, they're walking the pier, they're patrolling the pier area. So, yeah, for it to be manned by somebody physically in there with the door open, that's still in the talks.
Okay. Yeah. It's right now as they want to improve that outdoor dining area and then have some kiosks out there. It just seems to be a target for people to come by and do, try and make a little area to sleep or something, and they push stuff around and push things over often. So, and destroy things. That's not good. And by the way, how would they, when things like that happen, they should file a report with you? Is that what?
Yes, absolutely. Any type of vandalism,
Okay.
any type of crime, they would obviously call us. We'll come down there. We'll take the report. We'll do what we can to be able to capture any type of video footage and proceed with that direction.
And would that, if you saw enough reports of this stuff coming in, that would then garner some attention for you to spend more time in that area, correct?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Very well.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands up. Any last? So I have one last minute one. Director Proud, Jason talked about having some recommendation or options going to the council. Is the Harbor Commission going to see those?
I don't think so. I'm not sure what the current game plan is for that. I do know that that's part of a much larger budget discussion and operational discussion relative to fire services citywide, not just Harbor Patrol. So my sense is that's likely going to be going directly to the city council. So what I could do is when that report gets published, I could just kind of make sure you're aware that it's on the upcoming agenda. That typically, doesn't happen until a Thursday or Friday for the following Tuesday. So you wouldn't really have an opportunity to meet as the Harbor Commission, and unless it just happened to randomly occur, right before you have your Monday meeting. So, but there's no way to kind of control that. So I think that's going to go straight to the city council.
If we took a vote here, could you relay to the city council? We'd like to weigh in on that before they make a final decision related, not related to the whole city, but related to the Harbor Patrol.
Yeah, I think we could certainly relay that information to them. I'm not sure if it'll change much, but I'm happy to do it. I'm being candid. So, but yeah, so if you wanted to, so the issue is opportunity to review the recommendations related to Harbor Patrol.
Correct. I just want to take a poll here. Is that I think that's something all the commissioners would want to hear. Anybody don't care or don't want to hear that?
That sounds like a good idea.
I am here now. I'm working on getting my camera to work, but frankly, Chair, I'm not quite up on what you're discussing, so I'm not going to vote.
Okay. Steve, you okay with it?
Yeah, I think it's fine, Jim.
Okay. So Leslie, Vicky,
Fine with it.
and I saw Roger gave a thumbs up. So I think we'd like, Harbor Patrol is pretty near and dear to us. We would certainly like the chance to at least give our recommendations and opinion on the different options.
We'll relay that information.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentations tonight and the information and the engagement, and really appreciate all the activities all the actions you're taking to keep the event safe out there. It's been a busy summer and really appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Okay, next on your agenda, which is actually item L1. So we're going back to item L1, is a discussion and possible action regarding proposed amendments to the California Air Resource Board Commercial Harborcraft Regulations. I'm going to give you probably about a 3-sentence introduction and then turn this over to Ken Frank, who is the president of the Sport Fishing Association of California. Just by way of a little background, we were contacted by the Sport Fishing Association regarding the proposed amendments to the commercial harborcraft regulations that are set forth by the California Air Resource Board. There are some proposed amendments that would impact the emission requirements for commercial passenger fishing vehicles, and those new regulations could have a detrimental impact to the sport fishing industry. So what I wanted to do, we became aware of this probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, when we received an email from one of our tenants in the harbor. It then came up again at the King Harbor Association meeting where it was brought up. And so I asked if they would be willing to come and speak to the Harbor Commission about the proposed amendments to the regulations. And then you could have the opportunity to ask questions and decide if you'd like to take some action related to those proposed new regulations. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Ken Frank. And Ken, if you want to make some introductory comments, and then I can put your PowerPoint presentation up on the screen, and you just tell me when to hit the next slide and I'll advance it for you.
That sounds great. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your time. I got a very brief PowerPoint that I'd like to show, but as a point of introduction, the Sport Fishing Association of California, it's basically the commercial passenger vessel industry. So we have dive boats, whale watching boats, sport fishing boats, all up and down the whole coast, all the way to Santa Barbara. And then on the North Coast, the Golden Gate Fishing Association is actually working with us in conjunction on this thing. California Air Resource Board has proposed a rule, and this is it in a nutshell. They want to have a requirement to repower the vessels in the state to reduce emissions. And that, I think all of you, myself included, agree that's a great idea. So with that, I'd like to start the PowerPoint just to guide the discussion so that it makes some sense what I'm going to say. I don't want to get down into the weeds on it because it will confuse me. So I'll be try and keep it at a high level. Start out there in the beginning. Okay, go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is basically a synopsis of what is in place right now for the boats in your harbor. The 2010 Harborcraft Rule, so that's sport fishing boats and commercial fishing boats are combined as one group. In that regulation, they can go get grant money to repower their vessels. They've been in an ongoing program for years to upgrade their engines, and they have what's called a tier scale, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And up and down the coast, the coastal boats primarily are all upgrading their engines to whatever's the new best technology that's available. So important in this rule from 2010, and this applies to the boats in your harbor, they can get grant money, and they had to get a special kind of fuel that, again, trying to focus on reducing emissions. And everybody pretty much acknowledged they operate out in the ocean. They're not sitting in the harbor with an engine revved up wide open. They're out in the ocean. Go ahead to the next slide. So now we come to the current proposed rule. The 2023 January timeframe is when this would go into effect. Now that pie, that total pie that you see in front of you, is the commercial fishing sector of the state. Sport fishing, commercial passenger boats, up until now have always been included in that. They're licensed the same, except they buy an additional license at the end of the process to carry passengers. The blue ones, the piece of the pie that's the blue, those are the guys that sell fish in a market. Those are your lobster boats, your squid boats, and that type of thing. So this new rule cuts out that small piece of pie and segregates the two. The blue piece of the pie gets the same program that they've always had. Upgrade the engines when you're going to replace them to whatever's the new best engine. Continue to use grant money, etc. The green piece of the pie, which is the commercial passenger boats, anything that carries people, has been given a guideline that requires engines that at this moment in time don't exist. It's called a Tier 4 engine, and that type of engine for this size of boat hasn't been made yet. It will be at some point, but at this moment in time, it hasn't been made. They want to put this rule into effect in 2023, and then depending on the tier of engine, give it 2 to 6 years typically time to replace that engine or take the boat out of service. With this rule, they automatically have already put it out there that they believe fiberglass and wood boats in the state all need to be replaced with new boats. And the reason for that is there's some equipment that goes with this that is called after treatment. And I'll go into that a little bit more. But that's kind of a synopsis of this new rule. And go ahead to the next slide. So the classes of boat that it affects. The two bottom boats, those are coastal boats. Those are what you have typically in your harbor. The boats up above it there, those are the offshore boats. In our state, we've been able to determine that we have approximately 174 of these Coast Guard inspected boats in the entire state total. I think personally, CARB thought there were a lot more of them than there were. We did meet with them in the very beginning of this process, and frankly, they just didn't have a good understanding of this fleet, but they were trying to move forward with, it sounds good to do emissions reduction. We don't think they really had a good handle on what the implication of that was, especially when you see a boat like the Royal Polaris up there that operates in Mexico. It departs from San Diego, where 50% of the commercial passenger inspected boats are based, San Diego County. They fish offshore in international waters. They're not outside the Port of Long Beach, which is the primary focus of this rule, is those disadvantaged communities. They want to improve air quality in those communities. Well, these boats operate offshore. The coastal boats, they're at anchor most of the time. The boats in your harbor there, they'll go and anchor offshore on a half-day trip or three-quarter-day trip. The generator's typically the only piece of machinery running. But again, everybody's trying hard to reduce emissions. We all get what the goal is long-term. Next slide, please. So I'm going to break this down into three pieces. That center picture that you see right there, that's called a diesel particulate filter system. Basically, what this new rule requires is if you don't put one of those Tier 4 engines on because it doesn't exist, they'll accept a Tier 3 engine, which does exist, and will fit in the boats. But then you have to add this whole exhaust filter system. And that's the only example I have found so far in San Diego County, where I live. And this is on a tugboat with a 1,000 horsepower engine. But so it'll be smaller than that. But basically, it's a massive piece of equipment. And the part that's really concerning is the heat that's developed. They basically run the exhaust system up to between 700 and 1,000 degrees to clean out that filter when it gets plugged, which is typical on an engine that runs at slow speed, like a boat trolling, fishing, or what have you. So the bottom line is that thing develops a tremendous amount of heat. My sense personally is that's going to be something that you're going to need a steel boat in order to safely operate. I came from another world also. I did 30 years in marine law enforcement down in San Diego, and I was a firefighter. And I'm here to tell you, when you're on a boat and it's on fire, you don't want to have on a daily basis a piece of equipment putting out that kind of temperature. Ergo, why the state's comment that fiberglass and wood boats are going to probably all have to be replaced. That's 80% of the fleet in the entire state of California, but no mechanism to pay for it. To the right there, that's a picture from an engineer in Long Beach. Evidently, that truck had its diesel particulate filter light on fire and burned the truck to the ground. We can't afford to have that, not even one time on a boat. I think all of you are aware of the Conception fire. 34 people lost their lives. Worst fire that's ever been out there. We just simply, I'm in the middle of dealing with congressional meetings, et cetera, on that whole topic. We can't afford that ever to get again. We've made a number of recommendations to Congress to make sure that doesn't happen again. But to put something like this on one of those boats is just, I think that would be a very hazardous thing to do. On the left is the DEF tank. Anybody that's got a diesel vehicle knows what this is. But that's a large fluid tank that gets fluid injected into the engine. They want 10% of whatever the capacity of the fuel is aboard the boat. They want to bolt that tank on the deck somewhere and run fluid into that exhaust system. that affects the stability of the boat. So go ahead to the next slide. Working our way almost through it. CARB's comment at the end of the road is there's a possibility of some business elimination. That's pretty much it. We've made it very clear to them there's a lot more than just some. If you can envision your home, you've bought your home, you have a house payment. You know, you got whatever you owe on the loan. Same thing with a boat. Everybody, all the young men that own the boats in your harbor, they got a loan on their boat. If this rule goes through, number one, they're not going to be able to sell their existing boat. They're going to be upside down in a loan. And then they're going to be obligated to go and approach a bank to say, will you give me the funding to buy a new boat? Well, that isn't feasible. I had a bank president recently tell me, he says, you do know that if this goes through, a lot of your people, they're just simply not even going to qualify for the loans. One issue recently came up when I met with, I talked with one of the CARB persons managing the project. And I asked him, I says, have you gone to the shipyards to find out what building this new thing that you want is to make it legal? And they had not. And I said, you really need to do that because you're affecting a lot of people in this state. And you're doing it without all the facts. There hasn't been any outreach on the coast. I mean, you all haven't been approached by CARB, I would doubt. We've asked them to do workshops. Please come to the harbors, meet with the owners, et cetera. And they've done 3 webinars. And that's pretty much the extent of the outreach. And they have an email list. So in my years of doing public service, I had, and you are all in public sector work, you do a bazillion community meetings before you make a decision. So it's well thought out. And we've encouraged them to do that here. And there hasn't been much outreach to speak of at all. Next slide, please. I was doing a radio show weeks ago, and in the middle of the live radio show, this got sent to me by text. This is from a captain on a tugboat in Long Beach when he's looking at, I think he said there were 70 or 80 ships at anchor and in the harbor. And he took a picture of his screen there, and then he took a picture on his plotter showing all the ships. And then he took a picture of the ship that he was about to go assist. He said, the handful of your little boats that you have out there that are already with engines that are reducing emissions, he said, the target's the wrong thing. He said, look at this. He goes, I think we found our emissions. But I just show that to you, not to throw them under the bus, but just to say, why are we worrying about the little faucet that we're already maintaining really well instead of the massive flood that's occurring out in the street because of the water main broke? Next slide, please. So CARB hired the California Maritime Academy to do an analysis. I won't go into the details other than this analysis right here summarizes that it's not feasible and that after treatment devices, they're based on required equipment, et cetera, et cetera. Bottom line is it reduces the passenger capacity huge, and there is no technology right now that can be implemented to comply with this. Go ahead to the next slide. This is a really important factor. The boats, the people that go out on the boats in every harbor in this state, they're the people that can't afford their own boat or their own yacht. The kids, this group of kids, I took them out fishing recently. We have a program just with SAC and Friends of Rollo. We've done over 140,000 kids at not a penny to them to take them out for their first time to learn about the ocean. We have a ton of those programs, some sponsored by fire departments, police departments, you name it. But we have all these different programs as long as it's a reasonable price. But when to build a new one of these that you're looking at right there with the new type of machinery they want and the new hull, steel hull that would be required, you're talking millions and millions of dollars. It's going to double or triple the cost of a ticket to go on one of these boats. All these programs will be gone the next day. They won't ever occur again because no one will be able to afford it. It will become only a rich person's sport, and the fleet, it'll cause financial ruin for a tremendous number of people in the fleet. As far as the boats will go out of business. Next slide. Timetable, we're looking at November 19th as a CARB hearing. We have public comment right now where you all, we would highly encourage you all to submit a letter of concern and recommend that they they modify or object to the rule as proposed. We have proposed a solution to them. And it is that you lump commercial passenger sport fishing boats back into the commercial fishing sector, let them continue to upgrade with machinery that does exist, continue to let them use partial grant money to pay for it, and continue to serve all of the people of the state of California and keep the programs going that are there. We take out well over 1 million passengers each year. Very few of them own their own boat. We're pretty much the only game in town. This is a very serious deal. I've been working at SAC now 13 years. I've never seen anything like this. It's stressful beyond words to all of these families. They're all small businesses. They don't have the ability, wherewithal financially to go and get an engine manufacturer to build the new engine that will comply with this and still keep their existing boat in business. Next slide. Almost done, folks. So I have 2 slides here, but I'll leave this here just for a second so you can see. I've been up and down the coast with Marco Milliken. He's on as well with me. He's the media coordinator for this. We've hired a lobby firm, a media firm, as well as an engineering firm so that we can take a look at what CARB's doing and so that we can properly try to inform everybody what's going on. You look at that list of folks right there, I don't know one of them, of all of these organizations, that was reached out to by CARB. We have been relied upon, it seems, to go and carry the message of what's coming down the pike. All of these groups that you see right here, they've already joined the coalition that we formed. They've all submitted letters up to CARB and the governor, just saying, can we bring some reasonableness to the discussion? In simplest terms, what I tell folks, this is like saying that your hot water heater at your house has gone bad. We want you to tear down your house in 6 years if you can't get the new one that we would like you to buy. That's basically the simplest analogy. Next slide. This is continuing the number of groups. A lot of these are national or nationwide or statewide. And, all of the major organizations in the state are behind. Let's have the conversation. Let's do this smartly because the industry does have good recommendations that will solve this. There's a burning desire, it seems, at CARB to keep this schedule. We've been trying to reach out to them for over a year with recommendations. Our recommendations have fallen on deaf ears. They're going forward with the plan as originally written, just some small modifications. They'll tell you, we've given them some extensions. It doesn't matter when 6 or 8 years you have your heart doctor say, well, in 6 or 8 years, you're going to die either way. It's the same analogy here is 6 or 8 years, you're going to go out of business. Gee, sorry. That doesn't seem like a proper thing to tell people. Next slide. So we've recommended to everybody, if they can, submit a letter of support. Marco is on this call as well. He is coordinating, assisting with letter writing. And we have letters from city councils, chambers of commerce, business associations, even a long list of state assembly members have all signed on to letters, and we can provide all of that to you as well. And what's really interesting is we even have a letter we recently saw from environmental groups. And basically their view was that we weren't the target of this. They did not highlight in their matrices that sport fishing or commercial fishing boats were even included in their thought process. Their view of harbor craft was like tugboats and workboats in a harbor, not boats operating down in Mexico or offshore out of the Channel Islands, that type of stuff. So with that concludes my presentation. I welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you. Do you go by Ken or Kenneth?
Ken.
Okay. Thanks, Ken. That was very informative. Appreciate that. I do have a diesel engine van. I wouldn't want to have that on my boat, the DEF system on my boat. So I can appreciate that. What is it exactly? You want us to write a letter of support to your association, or do you want us to write direct to the CARB proceedings?
I'd like to have Marco answer that for accuracy, please. Marco?
Marco, you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, David. Yes, I think it would be best if you direct your concerns to CARB directly. The public comment period, as Ken mentioned, is open till November 15th. There are several municipalities throughout California who have expressed similar concerns. And I'd highlight 2 points real quick. Is Ken mentioned the concerns associated with DPFs catching on fire, but they also sometimes stall for hours at a time. And that's one thing to be adrift at sea for a long period of time, but also imagine entering your marina harbor, right? High seas, high winds as the engine stalls. That would give the crew only seconds to get the engines operating again before colliding with the jetty or other vessels or landings. And then secondly, one of our major concerns is that CARB did conduct some economic analysis, but it was not complete. As Ken pointed out, they did not reach out to various chambers of commerce and tourism and coastal communities introducing these regulations to them. And the reality is that sport fishing community generates $5.6 billion in economic activity every year, supports over 40,000 jobs. So imagine all the anglers that come to your harbor, and if they no longer came, what impact it would have on restaurants and retailers and your overall economy in Redondo Beach, not to mention tax revenue. And that's one thing that was seriously lacking in terms of the due process, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Have you reached out to other Redondo organizations like the Chamber and the Harbor Association?
We are scheduled to make a presentation to the Chamber on Wednesday.
And what about the City Council? Are we the stumbling block to the City Council, or is that a separate activity, or we the ones?
Yeah, I wouldn't say you're the stumbling block. We kind of became aware of this issue, and my initial inclination was really this is kind of feels like it's a harbor commission, something they would want you to weigh in. I really, frankly, haven't even thought about taking this to the City Council yet. You're really the first stop. As mentioned in the staff report, the comment letters are due. The deadline for those are November 15th. If you were looking to and were so inclined to direct staff to draft a letter on your behalf, we certainly could do that. You would have the opportunity to review it at your November 8th meeting, and we could calendar that for the subsequent City Council meeting if that was something that was important to also have the City Council consider it as well. So we really were bringing this to you almost as an independent action and haven't really brought it up to the City Council yet.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you bringing this to our attention. I mean, it just seems like an arbitrary and capricious rule that will just put, sport fishing boats and whale watching boats out of business, which is, that would be a shame, both from the recreational perspective and from the educational perspective for the whale watching and the marine mammal boats going out. Do you have a sample letter that we could use as a point of reference or point of departure?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to provide Stephen with several samples.
Okay. So I'll turn it over to that answers my questions. I really appreciate you bringing this to our attention. So I couldn't see who was first, so I'm going to go who's first on my screen.
Chair Light, you do have a member of the public who'd like to speak. So whichever order you'd like to take it, if you want to hear from commissioners first, or if you'd like to hear from a member of the public first.
Let's let the commissioners ask any questions first, and then we'll go back and go to the public. So Steve, I think you're up.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ken, I guess this question goes to you. Can you tell us what exactly is the position of your association? Are you proposing to just go back into the larger commercial harborcraft group and not be separated out? Is that the ask here?
That is a primary ask, and within that ask, the one thing that's a really good question. So some people say, well, do you just want to be exempted from the rules? No, that's not the case. We want to continue to abide by the harborcraft rules, reduce emissions, but within the framework that's provided to the commercial fishing sector. That's the solution to this entire thing. So in that case, we would continue to be able to use grant money. You would put in whatever is the newest existing type of equipment for the vessel, and it gives you a path to compliance versus no compliance the other way. So I think that's
well, this topic I've got some familiarity with because I've done this type of work for stationary sources. I'm quite familiar with what Tier 4 engines are. So let me see if I understand this. So the sport fishing group that's been separated, or the proposal, is going to give you less time to comply versus being put back into the main commercial harbor craft?
That's correct.
Group, is that it?
Yep.
So
and the other piece is with the commercial fishing sector, they're going to be using Tier 2 and Tier 3 engines. This Tier 4 piece is only with the sport fishing group. The tier 2 and Tier 3. The other thing is with the commercial fishing, they're not requiring the diesel particulate filter, which is the deal breaker for the other sector because we can't put them on the boat.
Right, they're quite expensive for stationary sources too. So they're creating this smaller segment for sports fishermen craft, and they're giving you 6 years to comply versus a much more larger amount of time being part of the other group. Okay, I think I understand that.
Correct. That's correct. One other thing, and I'll throw it out there again. I covered it just a little bit. We got 174 of these boats that are in the full-time business. Most of them operate very far offshore. They're not near coastal. And I've constantly brought that up to CARB that let's get down to the common sense piece here. They're already reducing emissions. Most of them are offshore or at anchor near shore. What are we really trying to do here? And that seemed to be the best way to accomplish the goal.
I understand. Well, CARB always doesn't make a whole lot of sense sometimes when they do these rules. So I'm somewhat familiar with the EPA regs as well. I understand that marine engines have had their own classification of rules outside of the typical stationary engines and non-road vehicles for years. But I know recently EPA has produced some marine regulations for engines. Is CARB pushing back on you because they have to do this because of what EPA is making them do? So that's what I'm asking. Yeah. So the
EPA certified engines are vessels over 805 horsepower. We don't have a single one in the state. Those are the engines certified to do this. But California is saying globally in the whole state, they are tasked with the EPA guidance to reduce emissions.
Correct.
So this is just a sliver of how they plan.
Okay, so California is doing what they typically do, and that's going beyond what EPA is requiring. Correct.
Marco had a comment he wanted to add to mine.
Yeah, and I would say the interesting thing that adds some confusion for sport fishing, whale watching boat owners is that technically the engines in a commercial vessel are identical to a passenger vessel. There's no difference. And then it's particularly confusing for boat owners in Northern California who operate their boats commercially for a certain period of time in contrast to Southern California. So they could be lobster fishermen for a certain part of the year. So they're trying to figure out, well, what rules apply to me if and when and how often. So again, their engines are technically the same, but they've been carved out. And there's not really, Ken, you might elaborate on this, there's really no sensible answer to why this has occurred.
That's a great point Marco brings up. We specifically asked CARB why, and their answer was because they felt that the leisure fisher person is capable of paying for the change. They felt that boats that fish exclusively for a market because they compete with international markets can't as readily pass the cost. And CARB has estimated it to be about 18%. It's going to be more like 200%. I mean, it's just simple math. But they just feel that the public can pay the bill.
I see. Okay, well, good. I appreciate the answers there. My general view is, I think your position is quite reasonable. I mean, you're not trying to avoid regulation. So you just want to be not basically targeted and pulled out of the larger compliance group, which makes a lot of sense to me. And as long as, California is not, going beyond what EPA is requiring, it seems, I think your position is quite reasonable. So I guess, Jim, I'd be supportive of the letter that would support these gentlemen, whether it goes to the city council or goes to straight to ARB. One thing I would suggest, though, and maybe Steve, I'm proud of you here. So there's some context in the letter. Do we have statistics concerning our own harbor, sport fishing, and these types of vessels that come and go? And what kind of impact would have on our harbor?
Yeah, we could definitely, try to dig back. I mean, obviously we're not at the same scope and scale of a San Diego, for example. I mean, we have a relatively small sport fishing operation here, but they do, contribute. They're one of the attractions that we have in the harbor in terms of people coming down and doing visitations down there. They do, have ticket sales for which we share in some of that percentage rent calculation. So we could look into our records and see what we could pull out to kind of support the facts and figures in terms of how it would impact Redondo Beach.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to quantify down to the letter, but it'd be nice to have some, make some general statements that, that it would have an impact and these activities do occur and these vessels would, would have a significant impact on our harbor. So
sure.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Vicki?
Thank you for that presentation. It was well done. As a recently retired commercial captain on sport fishing and sport diving boats, I've watched the industry over the last 20 years dwindle. First, being eaten up by slip and mooring fees, insurance, maintenance fees, fuel costs, and it's sad to see. It's all but gone. The sport diving industry is all but closed up in California. And one of the things that everybody forgets is that's how a lot of people get their first introduction to marine life. Whale watching boats that take kids out. Waterfront education is extremely important for people to understand how the ocean works. If you've ever seen a little kid that catches their first fish, it's absolutely amazing. There's nothing like it. And when you explain to some of them that they can't keep that because it's not the right size, they're learning conservation at the same time. It's a slippery slope, and shame on us if we don't do something to try and divert this to something reasonable. That's all I can say. And it's a slippery slope because next it's going to be recreational boaters with larger boats. So that's my comment. I strongly suggest we individually send letters, and that as a harbor commission, we send a letter as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. By the way, I apologize for being late. About 10 years ago, we fought a battle with the Marine Life Protection Act with regards to areas they wanted to close for fishing, recreational and otherwise. And there was some numbers generated at that time with regard to the economic impact of that activity for King Harbor and some of the other surrounding marinas. If I remember correctly, it was in the tens of millions of dollars. So the number is really very significant. And, you wouldn't think it that much, but there's such a ripple effect to other businesses in the surrounding areas. Director Proud, you might be able to find some of that information still there, just freshen it up. But there were some very big numbers. I would actually think the Sport Fishing Association might have some numbers. They may be more generalized, I guess, with regard to the Southern California area, but maybe they've got something for Los Angeles County. But I remember the numbers being very large.
And
that's it. Just wanted to.
Commissioner Kilroy, just because obviously I wasn't here then, and you wouldn't happen to have kind of a date range kind of bulk look.
So
I will tell you who does is Mayor Brand, because he was the
Okay.
chief for fighting that.
2009 to 2010.
Okay, perfect. That just gives us a place to start searching. Thank you.
Man, he
yeah,
may have a
it
lot of
was
data
quite a
for you.
concerted effort by a number of us. I went with Mayor Jin at the time to Supervisor Kanabe's office to get his support. But yeah, there was quite a collection of people looking to modify what they wanted to do with the Marine Life Protection Act. It wasn't that we weren't for it. It was just they were going to strangle recreational fishing and commercial fishing in the Southern California area with what the original proposal was. But yeah, Bill probably still has some of that. And
Mark Hansen.
there was somebody from Torrance. I just can't remember his name off the top of my head. But yeah, start with Bill.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other commissioners? I don't see any hands up. Okay, can we go to I'm Roger?
Yeah, I was going to make a motion, but I forgot we had to go to the public.
Yeah, let's go to the public first, and then we'll come back for motions.
All right, Jacob, I know you're here to speak on this matter. I have just unmuted your microphone, so if you'd unmute yourself, feel free to address the commission.
Hello, you guys can hear me?
Yes.
We can.
Hi, my name is Jacob Moreno. I'm one of the new owners at Redondo Beach Sport Fishing and Whale Watch. We just came in January. We're the owners of the Navigante. We just brought the Pescador in, and we also have the bait company there in your small harbor there. And I have to say, it's been amazing being in Redondo Beach, first off, and seeing how everything operates, and just seeing this and being a part of this. It's amazing. I want to say thank you too to Ken. He's been amazing in the short time I've been in the fishing industry. I've been running boats since 2014. I'm 31 years old, and my business partner is 33 years old. He would be here, but he's got 2 kids he's got to take care of. I want to say, first off, it is a scary thing to come in. I mean, we put our livelihoods on the line, investing into these vessels, and it has been very good to us. And we put all our efforts into making these boats beautiful and something that the public would look on and say, wow, we want to get on there, and we want to go fishing, or we want to go see some wildlife, especially in Redondo Beach. You got such a beautiful coastline, everything along that line. All our engines, just so you know, are tier 3 engines, the highest tier that you can get right now. That includes the Pescador, the Matador, and the Navigante that was just repowered in 2019. And like Ken spoke on, these aren't little changes, just to do a straight swap, the same size of engine in the same tier. The amount of work is almost gives me chills thinking about it, because it's pretty intense. We not only deal with what the emissions bring with the AQMD, but we're constantly dealing with different things that change with the Coast Guard, with the DFG. I believe it was Vicky speaking about how difficult it is. I mean, yes, the list goes on, but I will say that it's all passion that we use to get through it and to provide fishing and whale watching to King Harbor. It's a lot of fun. In this short time that we've been there in Redondo Beach, I have to say I've seen, since COVID, I mean, we moved in over there. We bought the boat in 2020. We put all our efforts into the boat, trying to make it safe, really. We had an amazing month and everything was rocking and rolling. And then COVID hit and we were shut down indefinitely. It took, we didn't get much of an answer for a couple months. We didn't know what was happening. I remember talking to Ken on this matter, and he just, hold fast and we got to see what's going on. And we got through it all. And I know that this is something too that we're going to get through regardless. And I will say, since COVID, the shift of people coming out, whether it's fishing or whale watching or sightseeing or anything like that, has been awesome. It's been amazing. People are bringing their kids out. People are even through COVID. We have a lower amount of people that are allowed on the boat. I've bought enough disinfecting spray and bleach. If you guys need any, I got a whole bunch of containers full. You let me know, I got you. But we've made that shift into providing that, and we plan on doing so. And I just wanted to say thank you to you guys for even looking into this matter. Thank you to Ken, and we're going to be here. We're going to try and make some more noise here, and we're running. We're operating at full capacity, what is allowed right now. And I wanted to say thank you to you guys, and that's what's going on in the short time I've been here. Redondo Beach is pretty amazing, and people really like it. We're just trying to make some noise, fishing wise, whale watching, and we're going to have our other boat. We just moved it up. We're bringing more people that want to come out fishing, and we want to add to the fleet. That's our main goal. So that's it. I want to say thank you, and that's a little insight from what I see on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. And appreciate you taking over those boats. They're beautiful boats down there. I love to see them going out when I'm paddling.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. A lot of work.
Let's see, any other members of the public, Stephen?
We don't have anyone else here to speak on it that I'm aware of. I believe Rochelle is here to speak on the next item, and she's the only other attendee that's here. Let me double check my screen here for e-comments. I'll refresh my screen just to make sure. And we do not have any e-comments, and I do not have any late emails on this topic either. So I believe that concludes your public comment on this item.
Okay, so I think one's can we get a copy of this briefing? Or I don't see it in the link that you give in the agenda.
The PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah.
That came to me from Ken separately. Ken, if you're okay with us sharing that with the commissioners. Okay, I'll give you the PowerPoint presentation.
So I'm not going to make the bigger motion, but I'm going to make a quick motion to receive and file that.
Great.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, we got a second from Vicky. Anybody opposed? Okay, so that's I'll let that one get out of the way. And before we get to Roger, Director Proud, sound like you had a vector where you wanted to write the letter. Is that the preferred route, or?
We'll leave it to you however you'd like to approach this. I put the offer in the staff report to just let you know that if you wanted us to draft it, we could certainly get some templates from Ken and Marco to do that. I think we could take a crack at it and bring it back to you at your November 8th meeting. If you have some particular direction you'd like us to include now, we could take that direction, but we were making the offer as staff to go ahead and craft that for you and bring it back to your next meeting, since you do have one more meeting before the deadline for submittal. Sometimes we don't have that luxury.
Right.
And we have to just kind of draft it and send it. But since we do have the opportunity to meet again, that was the thought. But happy to do it however you'd like to handle it.
Okay, with that information in hand, Roger, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks. I was going to potentially start with a smaller, slightly different motion. Ken, thanks a lot for the presentation. You had a list of organizations endorsing your efforts. Does it help to add our name to that list?
Absolutely.
Okay, then my motion is we allow the sport fishing organization, or we endorse the Sport Fishing Association's effort on this matter.
As the Harbor Commission.
As the Harbor Commission.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we have I think Leslie, you seconded it? Is that what I heard, or was it Vicky?
Me.
Okay, so we have a motion from Roger and a second from Vicky. Any discussion on that specific motion? I don't see any hands up. Let's do a roll call vote on this.
Okay, roll call vote in the order on my screen. Commissioner Carlson.
Yes.
Commissioner Bauer.
Yes.
Commissioner Callahan.
Yes.
Commissioner Krazan.
Yes.
Commissioner Kilroy.
Yes.
Commissioner Walters.
Yes.
Chair Light.
Yes.
So that passes 7-0.
Okay. Roger, any other, is that as far as you wanted to take it, or do you have another motion?
That's as far as I wanted to take it. I guess I expected there to be discussion of a letter. I was thinking that, a little bit of work on the boilerplate would work, but then further discussion made me realize the city may have additional specific input that staff could add. And, Commissioner Walters, I don't want to volunteer you. I know you're busy and already volunteering for the amenities plan, but you may have interesting input as well that makes this more than just, a rubber stamped boilerplate letter. And of course, those are more powerful. So I'll let discussion on a letter continue.
Okay, any other, Vicky, you've got your hand up?
Well, we can't wait too long. This is a soft motion to direct staff to work with Ken of the Sport Fishing Association to draft a letter to bring back to us on our next regularly scheduled meeting, showing support. Any comments?
Second.
I just question, is there a lack of, since Director Proud has offered, we don't want to put together a subcommittee and write it ourselves like we have been?
We could.
You certainly could, and look, we'll welcome that. Our plate is full, but if you,
I'd be happy to serve on it.
And we could forward the template as a starting point, and then you could decide what you wanted to add from there. So I would welcome that suggestion, but I just wanted to let you know that we were offering to help as well.
Okay, thanks. Steve, I think you've got a lot of experience in this area. Which way would you rather go? Would you rather have the staff write it, or do you want to be part of would you volunteer to be part of a subcommittee to draft our own, or?
Yeah, I would. I think it'd be useful if we had a starting point. So either staff can give us a starting point based on a template. That'll be good. And I have no problem serving on a subcommittee for the next couple of weeks to do that. If so choose.
So Ken or Marco, how quickly could you get us some kind of template that we could use as a point of departure? You're on mute, Marco.
I can send you some samples as early as tomorrow morning.
Okay. And Stephen, is there a way for staff to work with us on this one versus, just wait till we draft it and throw it over the fence to you?
Oh no, you can feel free to send it to if Marco sends me the templates, I can distribute those to you. Whoever ultimately sits on the subcommittee, you could take a whack at it. You could send it to us. We're happy to work back and forth on it. Our only deadline is, sorry, I'm going to reach for my calendar here, is that we would just need to distribute something back to you sometime around November 3rd to have it available for your November 8th meeting. So that's really our internal deadline, but we could, you could certainly email it to me or anybody on the staff here in the waterfront department. We can absolutely, go a little back and forth help.
Right.
What I'm thinking of is if the staff could help us with some research on the specific impacts for Redondo, which vessels would be impacted, what's the economic impact of that to our harbor, which I know we put together something like that for the MMPA discussions, but that was that was all fishing, not just commercial fishing vessels. So,
right.
So I can send you 3 samples. One would be the city of Dana Point, which I wrote a very compelling letter to CARB. I'll send you a draft of a letter that's going to come from all the chambers of commerce from the coast, from chambers from San Diego to Eureka. And then one that will also be submitted by the Marine Recreation Association along with the Harbor Masters Association, which deals with public safety. I think between the 3 letters, you can piece something together that suits your needs.
Okay, and certainly, it sounds like we're gonna ask for a letter, whether it's you guys writing it or a joint effort or us writing it. But so, can we make sure this is agendized for the next meeting?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure it's on your November 8th meeting.
Okay, so Vicky, having heard all this, do you want to make a formal motion now for us to,
Form a subcommittee?
well, I'm not putting words in your mouth.
Okay.
Having heard all this, what would your motion be?
My motion would be to form a subcommittee to gather the information and submit to staff.
And for staff to come back with a letter at the next.
Correct. At the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Okay, any discussion on that motion? Do we have a second, first off?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Vicky, a second from Matt. Any discussion on it?
Just a real quick question. Just to clarify, the subcommittee would actually be drafting the letter based upon information provided by the staff and samples and templates and whatnot.
Correct.
And who do you propose to be part of that subcommittee, Vicky?
Whoever wants to serve. Steve has a lot of background. That would be great. I haven't worked with him yet. I think it would be fun. And whomever else has time and wants to volunteer.
So if you have, just as a reminder, if you have 2 members, you can add 1 more person.
Right, we can have 3.
We don't trip the Brown Act requirements.
Exactly.
If there's a 3rd person who'd like to participate, you can do that, or you could.
Well, Vicky, are you volunteering?
I am volunteering.
Okay, so it's you and Steve. Anybody else?
Oh, yep.
Anybody else? Roger, is this something you have a passion for?
You haven't said enough about dive boats. I normally spend 20 to 25 years on a dive boat that, ain't running anymore.
Yep.
More due to batteries and COVID than this problem yet, but this will be the stake in its coffin.
Yep.
I'm always willing to volunteer. I always seem to end up on subcommittees. So I don't want to take the fun away from somebody else if someone else is interested, but
Well, I'm interested and I'm not on another subcommittee, but I think you may be more passionate on this than. So I offer it up to you. I'll do it or you can do it.
toss of the coin. I'm already doing the amenities this month. But I have time to do this as well.
Volunteering, Jim.
I hate being on every subcommittee. I feel like I'm.
Okay, I'll take this one then.
Okay, Jim.
So I put the friendly amendment naming the 3 people to be Vicky, myself, and Steve. If you'll accept that, Vicky.
I accept that. Second.
Okay. So let's do if any other discussion on that. I don't see any. Roll call vote, please, Director Proud.
All right, roll call vote. Commissioner Callahan.
Yes.
Commissioner Carlson. Commissioner Bauer.
Yes.
Commissioner Krazan.
Yes.
Commissioner Kilroy.
Yes.
Commissioner Walters.
Yes.
Chair Light.
Yes.
Great, thank you. 7 on the roll call.
Real quick, Jim, before we move on, can I ask Mark and Ken, you're going to be forwarding those samples. Can you also forward any staff reports that the ARB has written in support of the rulemaking? Do you guys have that? I mean, I could probably find it, but it'd be good if you guys already have that handy. You can send it to us as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I went to the CARB website and there were a whole lot of documents and links there. And so I decided not to inundate you with those until after you had this presentation this evening. But maybe Marco or Ken, if you can just kind of pick, 1 or 2 of the key documents that would think you would be relevant, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think you know what I'm talking about, Mark. It'll be the final staff report or the one that supports the rulemaking.
Yeah, and it's rather lengthy. I'll definitely provide
Yes,
you the
they
link.
typically are. Yeah. Just send the hyperlink. That's fine. Send the hyperlink to Steve and he'll just forward it to us.
And then part of your staff report is obviously from our perspective and analysis of those regulations. So, yes.
And then we do know that we got a text from Mark Hansen that Joe Farlow and himself were very involved in the MMPA. So maybe our subcommittee can tap them for any inputs. Vicky, do you want to be the head of the subcommittee?
Sure.
Okay. So you'll chair it, you'll call the meeting, and then we'll get kicked off on it.
Okay.
One thing
Okay,
I'd like
any
to
other
recommend is to have Marco provide our FAQ because it summarizes quite a bit of the material that makes it easy to understand.
And we did include the FAQ on our.
We have that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Ken, I want to thank you. Marco, thank you very much. I appreciate you gentlemen joining on kind of at a last minute request. So thank you for your involvement and your participation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And I do want to reach out to the rest of the Harbor Commission. I mean, there's yacht clubs that should be opining on this. We've got, I'll be reaching out to some of my councilmen to make sure they're aware of this and not getting it cold. But I think there's a bunch of organizations we all touch. We should be reaching out and, to get whatever support we can across the city on this.
One thing, and then I'll leave you with one final comment. The public needs to be monitoring this. They're doing the private vessel inventory right now over the next 24 months, and they expect to start the rulemaking for all the private vessels in the state commencing in 25-26.
I told you.
Their target for 2030.
Yep.
So we watched the webinar when they rolled that out. They called it their inventory meeting, and nobody really knew what that was till we were watching. So the public's better be paying attention.
It's a slippery slope. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you both for bringing this to our attention. Director Proud, thanks for putting this on the agenda. We have time to react. So,
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Gentlemen, thank you. Okay, sorry here. Let me get
Okay, so we're jumping to L3 now for anybody who's following online, the outdoor dining permit program.
correct. So I'm just kind of getting to, there we go, get to my report. So what I wanted to do tonight was, this is our third opportunity now to talk about the outdoor dining program. You've had it as a formal agenda item a couple times. You did form a subcommittee to look at this issue at your last meeting. That subcommittee did have a meeting with some of the operators of the outdoor dining spaces. We did an outdoor meeting out on the top of the International Boardwalk and had an opportunity to chat with them. I think it was well attended. I know for sure there were, probably 4 or 5, maybe even 6 different operators that attended the meeting. So we did get some good input from them as part of the process, and I'm sure your subcommittee members will talk to you a little bit about that going forward. I just wanted to say at the outset that, based on a lot of our conversation, just to remind you that this program did start as the temporary use permit related to COVID and to help the local businesses deal with the pandemic. And while they are still recovering, the program that we're really talking about now is more of a permanent program that could exist for some period of time in the future. So while I understand and appreciate the desire to want to help the business community, I do want you to maybe take one step back and appreciate the fact that this is a program that could extend for a longer period of time and really provides an opportunity for the local businesses down at the pier to ultimately expand their permanent footprint, if you will. It gives them an additional serving area, additional place to operate out at the pier. So keep that in mind as you're thinking through some of the issues. I'll highlight a few of them and then maybe ask your subcommittee members, Commissioner Bauer, Callahan, and Kilroy, they could give you some of their thoughts. I know Commissioner Bauer, you sent me a document right before the meeting. If you want to go through some of that, you could certainly do that as well. I wasn't able to blue folder that for tonight. But I would say, probably 4 just high topics that I want to touch on, and then I'll leave it to your subcommittee to maybe talk a little bit more about it. I think one topic that came up as part of the dialogue was a conversation related to, should the outdoor dining areas have more of a communal feel to them? In other words, are they a space where people could go from one area to another, or maybe be part of a larger kind of communal space up on the upper deck of the International Boardwalk or over on the pier itself by the El Torito space? Or should they be more of a individual business area that each business is responsible to own, operate, maintain, and really take care of those spaces other than the perimeter, which we've talked about the city being the one to install. So I would like you to give some thought to that. I think there are some challenges with the communal concept. I think, being able to make sure we designate who has maintenance responsibility. I think there are some ABC considerations. We don't fully know where ABC is going to land in terms of the alcohol permits related to these outdoor dining spaces. Many of them have been operated on what's called a temporary catering permit. We don't know coming out of COVID what the new landscape will look like in terms of their ability to operate. But I throw that out there for your consideration as you talk this through. I think one of the ideas that maybe started at the Harbor Commission, but certainly was picked up as part of the conversations were the question, should these be seasonal spaces or should they be year-round spaces? You could do a seasonal operation that might run from, say, mid-April to mid-October. That would be half the year, 6 months. And then at the end of that 6-month window, the operators could remove their, tables and chairs, kind of restore the upper plaza area to a more open area for the next 6 months. So we don't have these kind of equipment and fencing and barriers sitting up there and just being empty. And then bring them back out again kind of every April. We just kind of start over and refurnish the upper deck. So I certainly think that's something that would warrant some conversation by you. I certainly know at our last meeting, we talked about fees, considerably talked about the fee structure. We feel like the use of the public space on the International Boardwalk is akin to some of the sidewalk dining options. We understand that the operators do pay percentage rent, but the ability to expand their floor plate and be able to privatize some of the public space that we have down at the pier does warrant some kind of a base fee. That could be minimized if these are seasonal as opposed to year-long spaces. It wouldn't be quite as impactful, but that's certainly something to consider, as well as, the fees that are required to keep the maintenance, and that should be the tenant's obligation to do that. And then I think finally, just as kind of one of my last of the big four topics, and I think there are all kinds of subtopics you could talk about, but furnishings, how do the furnishings get put into place? We've had conversations that range anywhere from, does the city buy all of the furnishings and provide those, to does the operator just pick something for which we have review? We're starting to lean, just so you know, maybe, and you could talk about this, to maybe some kind of a limited palette where maybe there are, 3, 4, 5 different styles from which individual businesses could pick from that you've pre-approved, and that we as staff could then just authorize the use of up in the outdoor dining area. So there are lots of other details. You did get an email from one of our tenants, the Baja Chef, that had a laundry list of questions associated with them. I tried to capture some of these in just my opening comments. We've talked about these questions internally. If you have particular questions about those or thoughts on those, we can certainly take those. We didn't want to offer a written response back to them until we had this conversation. And then the last thing that I would just say is, and we could have either done this at the beginning or do this now, is I do think once we framed up the construct of the outdoor dining program, we would like to go back to the business community and just really test the depth of interest. While we had a lot of people at the meeting and they were providing some good thoughts to us, I do think it's important that we get a certain amount of critical mass to participate in the program. If we only have 1 or 2 people who are interested, it's probably not going to be as exciting and vibrant as it is when we have many more businesses operating that space and kind of providing that interesting outdoor area for use. So that's really my opening remarks. You definitely have the 3 members of your subcommittee that were there. I'm sure they have thoughts on what they heard, and perhaps the goal of creating the subcommittee was to try to drive to consensus on a few of these issues. You do have members of the public who'd like to speak. I'm sure Rochelle is here to speak on this matter. She'll raise her hand to confirm that for me. The only other person that's an attendee here is Mark, and I'm not sure if Mark is planning to speak on this topic or not. But if he is, he could raise his hand as well. We do not have any e-comments on this topic right now. I will double check that just to make sure. And that is still correct. So if you, with that, I would turn this over to you, Chair Light, and perhaps members of your subcommittee if they'd like to supplement my opening comments.
Yeah, I'd like to go to the members of the subcommittee first and then ask questions amongst the commission, and then we'll go to the public. So Tom, I think you've got your hand raised.
Yes, absolutely. So part of our, as we were kind of pushing through this, we had a lot of opinions on which direction. And it looked like in some of the cases, we could be kind of almost using a hybrid approach. Take the communal feel versus an individual area. If we design these so that you could move in between them, if we got ABC approval that would be okay, we could have a method for almost having it being able to be rearranged to make it communal. On the seasonal versus yearly, I think there was more.
Well, let me
go ahead
on that before you leave that topic, Tom.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
No, not
When
at
you
all.
say communal, what are you guys talking about? You have one big fenced-in area and everybody's a free-for-all?
Right. On the one end, it is the fact that people do buy stuff at Quality Seafood, and then they might wander down and get a beverage at the Slip, for instance. And just that, or you had a family and they want food and drinks from various locations, almost like this idea of when you have a food court, right, in a mall, where only in this case you have alcohol there, which is the complicating factor to this, because obviously the ABC would be involved in that. So yeah, on the one end, it would be a bigger area, kind of a more uniform, bigger area. And the other end, it's just the pods that were originally proposed. But we were kind of thinking towards the end that you might be able to do something more towards the middle, that you could have individual pods, but still allow for, if the ABC was okay with this, and they could figure out the licensing, that we could, it would be okay for people to migrate between those areas.
Okay, thanks. That answered that question. I apologize for interrupting you.
I don't know. And I was going to go through these four things here, but for instance, the seasonal versus yearly, and I'd love my cohorts to chime in at any time, but mostly it seemed like there was a pretty good support for going seasonally. Bob Resnick mentioned Copenhagen, and I think I want to try and use the word Copenhagen now for the rest of every meeting. But Copenhagen apparently does a really good job with outdoor dining, and they do it during the winter as well. However, obviously, you need to have critical mass and people wanting to do it in the winter. So the thought was, at least, and by the way, please chime in, but the idea would be certainly to start with seasonal, make it seasonal. Also, this kind of ties into how much does the city provide? How much is the city providing stuff, or is each of the individual businesses providing stuff? But even in that area, to do more of a hybrid of this approach as well, where the city would provide more of a minimalist, more permanent, substantial benches and tables, but not a lot of them, but those get augmented by stuff from the tenant, but from the businesses that would then, they'd be picking those things off an approved list so that we still maintain uniformity. Because I wanted to, by the way, I want to back up real quick, that everybody agreed with this idea that we wanted uniformity, right? And they want good security and low maintenance, durable, sustainable. And everybody agreed that they wanted standards to be set. Even if like the city comes up and says, you can buy off this list of stuff and this list of stuff, but strong sets of standards of high quality items so that we can maintain a look of a higher class outdoor dining area, because everybody realizes that's really important. The other stuff, those really were the two main things that we wanted to talk about. I thought we had a pretty good, pretty high level of interest, but we obviously got to make sure that we do have critical mass is key. I think and the more people are up there using it, the better. So we all want it to work. And with that, I'll defer to one of my cohorts, my subcommittee members.
Matt, I think you were next.
Okay, we'll take a shot. I think Tom hit a lot of the high points. So I would just add that one of the other suggestions that came up during the meeting is that the business closest to the outdoor dining area be given a right of first refusal with regards to any outdoor dining program. There were some other questions that came up that I'll just throw out there with regards to utilities, whether there were going to be any utilities, if this is a permanent thing, whether electrical or anything else, what would be the nature of lighting and so forth. One thing that just came to me is we may want to designate one area as a public. So the idea of people a family going and getting food from different restaurants and whatnot, if we had one area that was public, whether they brought their own food or, picnic style or whatever, that might also help that aspect of the outdoor dining program. And I think it also pays some respect to the fact that this is public space that we're now looking to privatize. The other issue that I heard from businesses was graffiti and making sure that whatever was put there was easily cleaned or graffiti removed, or however you want to address that situation by the nature of the materials, because there's a fear. Tom touched on the security aspect of it, and that's certainly more broadly stated, but also specifically graffiti. Obviously, theft of whatever is put there is another issue, but even if they're heavy and durable, if you can carve into them, or if tagging on them becomes impossible to remove, it will become an unsightly mess in no time at all. I concur that there was a broad support for having it seasonal. There was some concern as to what do you turn that space, how does it look in the off season? Not wanting to have just a bunch of abandoned, unused furniture and whatnot up there. Where would it go, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, these are kind of getting in the weeds. Lastly, probably from my own personal point of view, talking to some of the businesses, from their point of view, I'm sure they have broad support for this, of it being a bit revenue neutral. A number of businesses made the mention that they're already paying percentage rent, so that any increase in business, the city gets a cut of. I understand that we need to charge something. Riviera Village is being charged something, but it's really not an apples to apples comparison, because in Riviera Village, you're losing revenue from the parking spaces. This is not a situation where the city is losing revenue at all. And they're going to make something by the businesses being successful, more successful. And so that in and of itself, if the harbor funds didn't gain a dime directly from the outdoor dining program, they would benefit indirectly through percentage rents and the fact that the businesses are being successful. So my view is that the city look at taking the money that's received from this program for at least the first couple years and roll it back into making that area, really look good, and high quality furnishings, and what the materials used for separating the different areas, lighting, whatever else the businesses think is really going to help that area thrive and is going to work for them. I did hear a little bit different thoughts as far as what some groups wanted. I don't know if it was Najas or looking at picnic benches as an example, they were happy with, whereas I'm not sure that would be the best thing for other restaurants and other vendors in that area. I'm not sure that's quite what we're looking for either, but so I'll just throw that out there. Having some kind of palette, having some kind of choice as to what's put up there for some of the businesses would probably be a good way to go. But I think having the city actually look at having them buy and produce, own the furnishings might also be the way to go. At the very minimum, I would have the city make the dividing areas and have that done. And maybe you leave it up to the businesses for the first year or two. But I'd really like to see the money from this program rolled back into the program itself. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Vicky?
Yeah, you've covered most of them. I got from the business owners, first of all, they wanted first right of refusal for the footprint directly above their business. The next was they wanted an option for a larger one. I know Naj just said one wouldn't be enough. Everybody agreed they wanted the city to actually make the barriers so that it was uniform. Some of them wanted a little input as to ingress and egress. The general consensus that I received, and I have to tell you, it was a really nice experience. Everybody had their own comments. Some people had more than others. I think that's based on experience. They didn't want it to look tacky. They wanted it uniform. But most of them wanted either a hybrid or a seasonal option, because I had dinner on the pier last night and I looked up there at 6 o'clock and there was nobody up there. There wasn't one table being used. And this is only October, early October, and it was a beautiful day yesterday. So I agree with them. They may get something on New Year's Eve, but that's one day. I think the fee is a little steep. I got that from a lot of people. And they did want to have a choice about what color palette, if they could put plants. We did squelch the idea that they wanted plumbing up there. That's not going to happen because of the nature of the decking. Most of them have already figured a way to do the electrical so that they have lighting. Most of them wanted fire pits. They did want some of the permanent view benches removed so that they could move their furniture around to be more accommodating. And they all said they needed more security and they needed storage. One of the people from the slip said they had designed a clam shell design where it would fold down to cover their stuff and they could lock it. And then when they were using it, it would fold up to allow shade for whoever was working there. It looked like a great idea. We asked them to get us drawings, prints, cost of materials, and dimensions. And I don't know if that's come in yet, but that was a good option for storage. And that's about what I gleaned. Any questions?
No, well, I'd like to go to the public and then we can go beyond that. So I appreciate all three of the subcommittee members giving us their recollection. So Stephen, anything you wanted to add, having heard that?
Nothing right now. I'm fine with going to the public as well. I know you have Rochelle is here and has her hand raised. There's a Brenton Rieger who's listed as an attendee. Brenton, if you're here to speak on this item, if you could raise your hand as well, just so we know for sure if this is what you're here to speak on. But what I can do is open up Rochelle's microphone. Rochelle, if you unmute yourself, you can address the Harbor Commission.
Hi, thank you guys so much for taking so much time. We really appreciate it. Let me clarify two things that Vicky said just really quickly to start off. We didn't actually want plumbing up there. That was somebody who doesn't run a restaurant who was suggesting no, plumbing is not necessary at all. And then we don't want the benches removed. I kept trying to chime in when that topic came up. We have the bench in our area. We love it. People love sitting on the bench. And in fact, I was going to suggest, as you decide what kind of furniture you have, while I completely agree that it should be uniform in look, I would suggest variations in the type of seating, like maybe some benches, maybe some lower seating, maybe some higher, just different variations for people, I think is a nice look. And another thing I wanted to say is that, you know, I know that the businesses do get a benefit in that there's more business. We saw that during COVID. But I think that if we look at this as more of a partnership, which I think Matthew was indicating, where we look at it as a partnership where we're all working together to make the pier better, it might be a better way to look at it. We're not seeing a really significant increase versus the cost and the effort to run it there. So we just think it makes Redondo Beach pretty cool. At least that's my opinion. And like the fishing vessels issue, keep in mind that if you make the barrier to entry too high, you're going to have less buy-in. And even if you have less buy-in in the beginning, there's some of us who may be willing to make the outlay of funds while we get it going, while we build the following. And then some of the other businesses might be interested in joining in when they see that it's a viable proposition and that the public is watching. So I would say, although critical mass is important, I don't know that it's a make or break of the program. You could have one business up there, and if they're doing it well and people enjoy it for summer, then maybe people will join next year. So I think that is all I wanted to say. I really appreciate you guys again for taking the time, and I'm here if you have any other questions. I'm with the SLIP, so we are one of the businesses that probably has some of the most experience working up there this summer.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle.
Chair, if I could ask Rochelle a question.
Sure.
Utilities, I understand you don't need plumbing, but it was, Vicky brought this up with regards to electrical. What would be your expectation or desire with regards to electrical service?
I think electrical, all we need really is something to keep the beer cold and something to keep the lights on. And so I don't think that's very significant electrical.
But how are you doing that now, or how did you do that?
We ran an extension cord from our business. And then we found that it hasn't been very much interest from the public to stay at night, possibly because of the security issues that are there. It gets a little creepy there at night right now, to be honest, because you know the less people you have there, the more creepy it gets. And then so we haven't really been operating in the evening this summer. We did last summer when other people couldn't go to other restaurants, so they came to us.
Okay, so that you kind of answered my question, an extension cord. So I'll just throw that out there. That's one of the things the city could probably provide a little bit more permanent, proper solution for. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks. Vicky, you still have your hand up, or is that?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't lower it.
And Tom, I see your hand went up.
Yeah, I was just going to add that there was a little bit of discussion of actually putting, having lighting off the barriers too, which would be really cool, right? That it could add to the whole look and feel.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else from the public? You're on mute, Director Proud.
We do have another member of the public that would like to speak. Brenton, I'm going to unmute you, and you could unmute yourself and address the Harbor Commission.
Oh, awesome. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we're the new kids on the block. We're Project Barley Brewery. We just took over about 3 weeks ago. And we've kind of seen what the SLIP's done during COVID, and we have high aspirations to kind of do what they're doing. And one of the things that comes to my mind as we're building this out and getting things going is the security, like Rochelle had mentioned, and just lighting up there. And we got several emails before we even took over that there were homeless people sleeping in our area, and we kind of had to start dealing with it before we even signed the lease, which is fine, and we did it. But lighting up there, like you had mentioned, might be pretty good. The other thing, electrical, we have an extension cord running as well. But we actually don't even have internet in our restaurant, which is making it really hard too. So, there are other concerns that are kind of interesting as we've taken over and realizing that we can't run a restaurant without internet. And Frontier DSL is 25 years old. So we are definitely interested. I thought the price was kind of steep, judging the seasonal nature of everything. But it's such a sweet spot up there. It's so cool. Everybody I talk to, we're all local. I live in Redondo Beach, and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, it's so cool up there in the summertime. It's so great." But that wintertime, running a business is kind of what is kind of making me pull back a little bit. But if if it's reasonable for both of us and, it makes sense, I think it'd be so cool. My wife and I have spent a lot of time in Europe where everything is kind of outdoors and communal. And when that was brought up at the meeting, I was like, man, that makes a lot of sense to have this kind of community setting. And it's not like yours and mine and, the American way, but more kind of, let's get something uniform, and whoever sits up there can sit up there regardless of where they bought their beer or their food, or, if they're just watching the sunset. I think that's kind of a cool idea. I know with ABC rules and health department and all that stuff, it might become a little tricky, but I think everybody's smart enough to figure out a way to do something cool like that. But either way, we're in, as long as it makes sense for both parties. And we're just really excited to be on the pier there.
Okay, thanks, Brent. And I have a question for both of you. First off, on the communal dining, we have to section it off. We can't just block the whole public access to the railing area. So how would you first see the communal area working?
I just think it's open. It's sectioned off above each little section there. It's sectioned off, but there's an entrance on both sides, entrance and exit on both sides. And as you move down the way, it's kind of set up the same way all the way down. So you can come in, you can come out. And if I bought a beer at King Harbor, I could go sit at Slip Bar, above Slip Bar.
Or is that model you go buy it and then take it upstairs?
Yes.
I have a question. Brenton, have you talked to the ABC about whether your patrons can carry it upstairs or whether a server has to do it? That's number one. And number two is, have you talked to the ABC about communal sharing of the pods? Because you have different licenses. Some have beer and wine only, some have a full alcohol license. And I don't know how that's going to work.
So my understanding is if there is a label on the cup, then they can easily identify where it came from.
Okay.
I believe the gentleman at Quality Seafood had mentioned during the meeting that there was some sort of loophole that kind of made this communal thing possible. I do know for sure that in December, the walking away with a pint of beer, even with a lid on it, is probably going to go away. But with all the COVID stuff going on, they might extend that. But that's something that I'm more than happy to research. We've dealt a lot with the ABC, and I do think there's a way around it. And not that we'd be skirting it, but like a legitimate way around it. And there are other places set up like that as well. And I'll have to dig in and take a little deeper dive. But yeah, I think it can be done.
Because it would be really difficult for your servers to have to take the order, run downstairs, get it, bring it back up. Even if you had taps upstairs, you wouldn't be able to have everything available.
No, the logistics are a nightmare. We'd have to have 20 people on staff for a place that seats 38 people. inside. It would be nearly impossible, but if people could walk up, under the, ABC guidelines, walk up, sit up there, have a beer, much like, other countries do. It would be, really easy. I know the ABC is a kind of a looming thing, but I think it's possible. And I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm new at this, but I don't know the gentleman's name at Quality Seafood. But he seemed to think that there was a loophole that other cities have been able to kind of implement and get around it.
Well, thank you very much.
No problem. My pleasure.
And this is for both Rochelle and Brenton. What do you think is an equitable payment scheme for your restaurants, for your businesses?
I'm going to defer to Rochelle on this because she's been dealing with it.
I think it just depends on what you're going to expect as far as the payment for all of the infrastructure. Personally, of course, I think that the percentage rent is the equitable payment scheme because everyone is benefiting. And like I said, I see it more of a partnership than just our business getting to privatize the upstairs. I feel like it's our business almost acting like a vendor for Redondo Beach to provide these services to the community. And so, especially if you're going to ask for an outlay for the tables and chairs, we already spent close to $10,000 putting together our little janky area that we have now. So I think it's not a question that can be answered in a vacuum. We have to sort of figure out, maybe that's the last piece you figure out what exactly you want and how you want to run it, and then figure out, okay, you should pay for it.
Yeah. Well, but the infrastructure is a one-time payment, right? And then some maintenance. So, I'm not sure that's the right way to look at this, but.
And I suppose there's a lot of ways to look at it. We would have to then redo everything that we have and then store it and whatnot. So I think if the city provides a lot of that infrastructure, then charging a fee to the businesses makes some sense.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for these two from the commission?
No.
Roger?
So not really a question, just a comment. People have talked about, looking for loopholes for ABC. I almost think we should try to, have the ABC draft new rules, and maybe you go to the county or the state. The ABC just approved, permanent takeout cocktails, and a year ago, who thought that would happen?
Never happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think communal dining, outdoor dining, and stuff like this is something many cities, if not every city, is going to be dealing with, and ABC should look at that and help us figure out a way to make it legal.
Well, I have a hard time believing that this hasn't happened somewhere else.
I agree. Yeah. And if it hasn't yet, it will soon.
Yep.
Stephen, I have a question. You're muted.
Yeah, go ahead.
How does the alcohol service work in Riviera Village where they have to cross the public sidewalk? Is that server only, or can a patron bring theirs out?
Yeah, it's largely, those businesses are largely server based. They've kind of just been an extension of their space. And the distance is fairly short, right? Almost all of those patios are directly in front of their business. So to just, create a new station for a particular server that's taking care of a certain number of tables is a little more direct there. The distance between the upstairs and the downstairs is what kind of creates the bigger logistical issue for the businesses that are out there. So, I can see why that's a challenge. And having worked in a restaurant in my college days, that was a 2-story restaurant. The people who had the upstairs shift really love it as much as the people who had the downstairs shift. But it can be done. It's an operational challenge, but it can be done. I will say, we do, and I mentioned this at the meeting that we had with the business owners. The ABC piece, I certainly think is something that's kind of one of the big looming questions in terms of some of these other issues as to whether it needs to be individual spaces or communal type spaces. We currently have an issue with what I call the wandering cup. And if the police department was still on here, they would probably talk to you a little bit about the fact that some of the businesses right now that have some outdoor spaces, the cups tend to wander off and make their way, and people are walking around the pier drinking and walking at the same time, which obviously is not something that is allowed. Or cocktails to go is one thing, but cocktails and drinking to go at the same time is a little bit different.
But they haven't started putting their names on the cups yet.
Well, and we tried to, so this is the challenge, because then that becomes the next level of enforceability. So I can tell you, places like, and I'm not trying to single anybody out, but, Portside Cafe or Charlie's or some of those places where we've had problems in the past. One of the things that we've asked them to continually do is to pour into cups that have their name. So if we do see a wandering cup, we kind of know where it came from and we can try to address the issue.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is not to throw cold water on it, but just to point out that has been a challenge for us in the past, to have somebody get a drink and then have to go to another location upstairs invites that opportunity to continue to have more of the wandering cups.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to think that one through a little bit in terms of how that works. Having the names on it is helpful. So if an officer or somebody out there says, hey, I've seen, 10 people from the slip, or not to pick on you, Rochelle, walking around with the wandering cup, you can go talk to the slip and say, hey, you really need to make sure people are making their way up to either staying inside the business or making their way up to your established area or the communal area if that's what it needs to be. So,
Okay.
It's just one of those operational challenges that you have. We have it today over on the pier. It'll just be something that we need to be cognizant of as we go forward.
Thank you.
So my concern with the communal, I like the idea of the communal, because there's times I know I'd rather eat at a different or get food from a different restaurant than my wife. So that food court kind of environment would be nice. What I've experienced in Europe though is, I don't know where you went, Brenton, but everywhere I went in Greece and Italy and Spain and France, you were at a restaurant or a cafe and they waited on you. You didn't carry your stuff out. So I'm unfamiliar with the communal approach other than like food mall courts. And my concern with that is then who pays for the, patrolling of the area to make sure, it's clean. You clean up after people leave, they take out the trash, all that. That's an administrative burden on, I don't know who would pay that. Is that a city burden? I don't see, cities not going to fund it out of the goodness of their heart.
Can I address that question?
Sure.
Okay. Well, we're already dealing with that sort of communal existence right now, mostly with quality seafoods, wandering crab and oyster things. One thing that at least the slip talked about as far as cleaning is creating the communal, the public thinks it's communal, but it's not communal, right? Like every business that wants to participate, being responsible for the area that they're responsible for. And since everyone's taking things everywhere, we share it. Or perhaps putting into a fund, something that we would pay for, to have a cleaning company come, at the end of the day and really do a good clean. Right now, at least at the slip, we try to just clean up after everyone. We clean up all the gross fish stuff that's in front of our place every day. And it's just something we have to get people to agree to do to make it a great spot.
Okay. Yeah, I happened to sit, and this was on the pier, not on the International Boardwalk, but I accidentally sat in another restaurant's area when I got some food on the pier, and they chased me out pretty quick.
Oh, I heard that. It might have been us. We tried to chase people, but I think we've been
No, it was on the pier. It wasn't you guys.
Oh, on the pier.
Yeah.
Jim, it's because you're a raspy looking person.
No, I'll tell you who it was. I'm not trying to cast aspersions, but it was El Torito. Kicked me off. I got something from, I forget which shop, just a soft pretzel or something, just sat down with a soda and waiting for my wife and daughter, and they chased me out pretty quick.
Thank And I get
Anyway.
that from their perspective because during the whole time when we were doing COVID, we were under the assumption that this is our restaurant. This is the only place we can operate right now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if you fill up my tables, then I can't operate.
No,
If we
once I
have
understood that, I
understanding.
fully, I was not mad at them. I understood it. So I just, it wasn't clear what areas were who's, who
Right.
belonged to what. Okay, so, we've got a lot on the table here. I almost feel we're not going to craft this in a meeting like this. Unless we want to sit here and nitpick apart the guidelines and application, but given what we heard today, there's all sorts of alternatives. So I think I'd like to keep the subcommittee going and come back with hardcore recommendations for moving forward.
I believe
Vicki?
Stephen said that there would be another meeting with the business owners to hash out some more details. And I think until that happens and we have feedback from the ABC, I'm not sure we can go forward. Stephen? You're muted.
The ABC information is probably the most important piece of information if we really need to understand how that relationship would work to kind of understand whether we really truly need to have defined areas for which there's a business that has responsibility for that area. If that's what their permit is going to obligate them to do, we kind of need that piece of information. And I don't know that it exists right now, and I don't know when they may ultimately provide that guidance. As I've said to you before, nothing is certain anymore with coming out of the pandemic and kind of how they're approaching. You raised an excellent point earlier about sort of making a more permanent move to cocktails to go. No one in their wildest dreams could have ever imagined that would be something that maybe would become a more of a permanent feature. So we don't really know exactly what the landscape is going to look like on a go forward basis. So that said, I mean, either we could. I'm not sure at this point. What more we'll get from the business owners until we maybe either refine some of the concepts and really test those out with them and say, okay, what do you think about this and what do you think about that? We've gotten a lot of good feedback. I mean, Rochelle sent us a presentation. We got feedback at the meeting. I think we have a sense of kind of where they want to go, but the question is whether we can actually get there or not. And I don't know the answer sitting here today. And my concern is I don't know when we'll know that answer. That's probably the bigger variable. And so the question is, do we want to try to craft the program in light of what we know today? Or do we want to go into a little bit of a holding pattern and see if we get some more clarity on that particular issue?
I'd like to see a holding pattern at this point. I don't think we're ready to go forward.
What we could do is start to look at maybe some of the other issues. We could start to look at the questions of, do we want to put together a furniture palette so that we could start to think through, the furnishing questions. We could maybe think through the design of whatever the perimeter might look like for that particular piece of the puzzle. I think, and this might be dependent a little bit on the communal piece, I do think we're going to have to really get to the bottom of kind of the fee question and, how this space works. I appreciate the idea that, hey, we get a percentage rent component, but I also, you all are aware that everyone's leasehold on the pier has a base rent and a percentage rent component. And this is an expansion of a floor plate, more or less. But again, it depends a little bit on whether you're talking about something that feels more like a communal model versus not. I think Chair Light brings up the good point, which I brought up at the meeting, which is the more communal it is, that the city just doesn't have, and if we're all being 100% honest, we don't have the ability and the resources to do the operational maintenance of this space.
Oh, no, never.
It's just not something that's kind of in our core mission. So I think we could talk about some of the issues and maybe try to nail some of them down and get to some hardcore recommendations. But there are some that are just going to be unknown for some period of time. And as we get clarity, we can certainly bring that back around. My last thought is I'm just I'm not sure if that clarity will come before your next outdoor cycle comes. You know, which would be sort of in the April timeframe. If we know something over the next 4 to 5 months, great, we could come back and kind of tackle this issue in the February, March timeframe. But we just have to hope that that emerges during that window.
Yeah, well, I'd really like to see what the ABC is going to do. And I think if we directed a letter to them and asked about certain things, they may have something for us.
Yeah.
I'm trying to raise my hand. I don't know if it's out of order, but I feel like you guys have missed the part where we said, I've talked to the ABC about this idea before. The ABC has already got guidelines in place where if you have a delineated area and you have marked beverages, you can make this happen. I'm willing to call them again. The lady's name, I think, is Lovey. It's a cute name. I'll call her again tomorrow and have her provide me with the specific information and the form and whatnot. But this can be done.
Yeah, and I guess, Rochelle, the question is, what does delineated area mean?
Well, and we were kind of talking about having a kind of a hybrid approach, not one great big area, but that you can move from one of these delineated areas to another.
They just need an area that you can tell when people leave the area that's the non-alcohol allowed area. So, for example, we had once asked them about just doing it on the pier in general. Take the International Boardwalk, for example. If you had some sort of security or gate or something at each end of the International Boardwalk, that entire area is a delineated area and people can move from business to business with their cups. As long as the EBC knows who got somebody too drunk, then that's all they're concerned about tracing it back to, much like the police.
Sorry for asking the question, Chair Light, if you'll indulge me. Who holds the permit though? So let's say in that example you just gave where you put an entry and an exit gate on the end of the entire International Boardwalk. Who's the actual license holder who has responsibility for the space?
I don't have my notes from this conversation that I had with the person in front of me right now because it was already a couple of years ago. And so I don't know the answer to that question, but it's something I can find out. Okay.
Yeah, because I think that was the question that we're, and maybe it was Jeff at Quality Seafood who was kind of raising the question of, you know, if it's more of a common area that's a little more free flowing, right? Who's holding the permit for that delineated area? You know, in your own area, you hold your permit, you're responsible for your area. And trust me, I understand the appeal of the communal concept, but we just want to make sure we understand what the parameters are that, you know, that are going to be the enforcement mechanism for somebody who has a license for that use.
Yes, I got it and I'll report back to you all.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
But yeah, and I think that has to include the component of being able to walk from the actual restaurant upstairs to whichever communal area you pick.
I agree. I think it's a fair question. I mean, it's you know, the question that you asked about the Riviera Village, it's not just across the sidewalk and it's not a server bringing it over to you. You know, we're almost talking about like a takeout window that you're going to then go to a completely removed area. And, you know, understanding the mechanics of that I think is going to be really important.
Right, but understand that they do pour beers up there, so that could be potential. But there are certain select beers you can buy when you're up there, and that's part of the kiosk idea as well. That they would have power and ways to serve beer up out of this, you know, these clamshell items.
Okay.
But I wanted to add one last thing, which is we have a lot of things to talk about, and certainly the ABC part is a component, but I believe we should definitely be moving ahead on this and trying to get as much nailed down as we can.
So I think before we go, I want to let Roger's had his hand up for a while, so I want to let Roger roll back up to the camera and talk to us.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Something has started buzzing somewhere in my office and I'm going slowly insane. No, I just wanted to say there were some comments talking about the timeline for this. It would be great to have something in place like next spring with or without the ABC. And Director Proud, I think you made that comment. Like, you know, if we can pilot this through the winter, build it up through this winter, and then go into next summer with a better looking pier area, even if we don't have certainty from the ABC. But from Rochelle's comments, boy, if the ABC may be on board somehow, that's fantastic. So thanks.
We could always start with the individual pods and then open it up if the ABC says go for it.
Yeah, you can always rearrange the furniture and, do something different.
It sounds to me like there's at least enough data to make some assumptions and start moving forward. There's a lot of details to work out. I'm afraid if we just wait on one item, we're going to lose a whole lot of time. So I would like to see us keep moving forward. We're not going to craft it in this meeting. There's too many nuances. I think, Director Proud, you have some parameters that you can say the city absolutely won't do this.
I like, and that's kind of why I started, with some of the thoughts that I had originally, things like furnishings, things like seasonal versus year round. I think we could start to shape up something around those ideas. And maybe we come at this, given that we don't know the answer, to the point I think Commissioner Carlson was just making, that if we come at this as individual spaces for now, since we don't know the answer, if we're able to get information from Rochelle, or we're able to get some feedback from the ABC that could allow us to move in a different direction, we can certainly allow that to inform us. But I think there are some kind of key decisions that we could still go ahead and continue to try to advance, so that when we're ready to roll it out, that we have the opportunity to do that. So if that means continuing to work with the subcommittee to try to firm up those recommendations, I'm fully supportive of that approach.
That's my suggestion, is the subcommittee meet separately and do a framework based on what the city has already our staff has already put out, and make some notations and bring it back to another meeting.
I think that's the way we have to go. We're not going to craft it here. So,
no.
But okay. So my question is, are the volunteers for the subcommittee from the commission comfortable with staying on and continue?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Matt? Yeah, so subcommittee's still intact. If we could get together even by Zoom or at one of the businesses down there and go over some points and do some framework and send it to staff.
That would be great. We'd appreciate it.
And can we just get an agenda item for, updating us each month, each meeting?
We could. If it's not super substantive, I could report it in the director's report. If it's something that requires a little more conversation, we could actually agendize it.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Who is the lead of the subcommittee? Is it someone from the city, Director Proud?
We haven't, the subcommittee themselves, I think that, really we kind of had the one meeting with the business owners just as a listening session to hear what their questions and concerns were. And so I don't think we really designated a lead on the subcommittee necessarily. So the first real meeting was more of just a listening session than anything else.
Yeah, I understand, but if we're actually going to produce, if the idea is to produce a product.
I think we'll have to. We'll have to certainly kind of take a little bit of the lead on that. We can attend the subcommittee meeting with you if you'd like to have a staff member there.
That would be nice.
Elizabeth, I'm going to volunteer just because she drafted the first round of the guidelines, and so is probably the most familiar with what they say and has done the research on some of these programs in other cities and jurisdictions and looked at some of their guidelines. So if you want to have a subcommittee meeting and have a staff member there, we can certainly do that to kind of help guide us in terms of the things we want to try to memorialize. We can start to work our way toward a series of recommendations.
Well, that works for me.
And maybe I'm using the wrong term when I say subcommittee. When I view it as a joint panel of the city, the commission, and then at least some rep from the business organization.
Yeah, I think it would be iterative. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like any project like that, somebody needs to lead it and put together a schedule. Because if you don't put together, a schedule, you're never going to get there.
Right. Okay.
What do you want to accomplish when? And then you can start to form how many meetings do we have and what's the topic of each meeting. And, similar to the amenities plan. How do you get down to a final product?
Right.
So Elizabeth, you're the person?
Are you going to be the one to lead it or who? Yeah.
We'll talk about it internally, but
Or, yeah. I mean, it could also be a commission member as well, right?
Yeah, it certainly could. I mean, look, we're not saying it has to be staff. All I'm saying is if you want to have staff representation as part of your subcommittee meeting, which I think you probably would, we definitely, Elizabeth has a lot of familiarity with the topic because she's done all of our internal research on it. So she could, tell you what some other communities are doing on certain topics or certain issues and could maybe help shape some of the conversation from our perspective. So I'm just offering that up to you.
I think the important thing is the city's going to have to administer this. So, the city staff's, input is critical to this because we could saddle you with something you go, we're never going to do that. And nobody wants to waste their time.
Right.
So,
And we've been trying to be pretty candid. I think I was fairly candid at our first meeting with the business owners to just say, look, I want to be real about what we can do and what we can't do and manage your expectations and, understand that we don't have the capacity and the resources to be able to provide, daily maintenance and cleaning and, sort of ongoing operational support for this type of an issue where we're challenged just to get the bathrooms cleaned and try to keep a relatively clean public space down at the pier as it is. To add an additional workflow on to the public works staff is just not something I could envision at this time. So if it's a communal space that starts to evolve, we'll have to talk about how that operational support takes place. I think Rochelle had an idea of maybe there's a contribution that happens from different businesses to help support it. I mean, those are all things we could talk about.
or it could be a bid type of thing where a bid, kind of funds it, right?
It could. We could think about some kind of maybe it's a restaurateur, a group of restaurateurs who just kind of make a contribution based on some metric who help fund it. I mean, there's lots of different models we could sort of approach this from. But
right. That's why I think it's important to have all three arms, the Harbor Commission, the city, and at least some representative from the businesses, to get this, because we won't get there by April, if we don't take it by the horns.
Okay, well, we can coordinate getting the next meeting together and, start the conversation and start to figure out the things that we can tackle now. And if there are things that we want to wait a little while on, we could do that with the goal of our goal will still be to try to get something implemented in some shape or format, by the springtime of next year.
Yeah, and I think the original intent was to, once we get something honed out here, to expand it to the pier area too.
Yes. And one of the representatives at our meeting was El Torito. So, and
that's right.
And Bob Resnick and one of the restaurant representatives was there as well. So they are interested.
Okay, any other discussion? I don't think there's any action. I think we discussed the actions, continuation of where you guys were going, just some kind of vectoring.
Yeah, maybe
just the work. I appreciate
it. Just to receive and file?
Yeah. Motion to receive and file.
Second. Anybody opposed? Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody's work on this, and I appreciate Rochelle and Brenton participating both in that meeting and informing us tonight. Your input's critical to this because we want to make it something that's a win-win for peer patrons and for the businesses down there. And I think, I love outdoor dining. So if there's something we can make work, and I've always been disappointed with International Boardwalk because it's so compact, and this kind of expands it to a different experience. So appreciate the efforts there.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, Brenton. We appreciate your input. We already discussed H4 will be brought back to your November 8th meeting. So moving on to H5 Director's Report.
L.
I'm sorry, L. That's L5. My apologies. Director's Report. I'll try to keep it brief, but I do have a few things I want to make sure you're aware of. So as I always do, I try to let you know what's been on the previous agenda items for the City Council and what's coming up. At the September 7th meeting, We had quite a few housekeeping, leasing, subleasing items, architectural mailboxes, nausea, savoir faire. Those were all discussed as some subleases that the city entered into. There was a amendment to the Beach Life Festival license agreement at that agenda, and that amendment is what allowed the Beach Life Festival to operate a little bit later this year than they had the previous years. As you heard me say in the report by the public safety folks, I imagine that the Sunday night ending time will be pulled back from the 10:30 that was agreed to as part of this amendment. This amendment also importantly provided some additional funding for reimbursement to the city for some of our costs for the public safety component for supporting the Beach Life Festival. So it was important to get that amendment approved at the September 7th meeting right before Beach Life started. At that same meeting, a topic near and dear to all of you was the city council did restore the Moonstone Park funding back to the capital improvement project for Moonstone Park. Thank you for your letter to them. I think they took it to heart and restored that funding back to them. They also engaged in a conversation, as I told you they would, related to Seaside Lagoon and the visioning for Seaside Lagoon. There was $50,000 that was set aside as part of this year's budget. The Public Works Department brought forward an agenda item to talk about selection of a couple of consultants to help provide some visioning activities for the Seaside Lagoon. I think the city council was intrigued by one of the firms, perhaps less intrigued by one of the other firms, was suggesting that we may need to broaden the outreach for firms that could participate in that visioning exercise. And so that process is now headed down a path for an RFP to go out and find one or more firms that would help the city as part of that visioning exercise. Ultimately, that gets folded into the broader public amenities plan process. So we'll find the appropriate place to plug and play with those visionary exercises for Seaside Lagoon into the broader public amenities plan. So that is currently in the Community Services Department to put together a RFP and go out and solicit firms for that visioning exercise for Seaside Lagoon. At the September 21st meeting, the sublease with Barley Vibes, you just heard from Brenton. So his sublease was approved as part of the September 21st meeting. And then also at that meeting,
which leasehold is he in?
He is in the space that was previously the
Bass Kitchen and Fish and Friends.
Thank you very much. I couldn't remember Bass Kitchen. Help. So that's that he's taking that space. Also at the September 21st City Council meeting was a contract with Walker Parking for an assessment of the parking structure and a seismic evaluation. We do this periodically. There was a sense, given the tragedy in Florida with the collapse of the condo building there, to refresh the structural assessment. And we hadn't really done a full seismic evaluation. And so that will be included in the scope of work. One of the advantages of having the availability of the Fun Factory is we're going to be able to go into that space and look at some structural items in there that when the business was operating would have been a bit more challenging for us. So that'll be part of their scope of work as well. So ultimately the city council will get an updated structural assessment and seismic evaluation for the parking structure itself. And those evaluations and assessments have really been the precursor to some of the scopes of work that we've been engaged with kind of on an every other year pattern as part of our capital improvement program. So we got an assessment done about 5 or 6 years ago, and that formed the basis for the scope of work that we've been doing. This will now update that and inform the scope of work kind of going forward for future improvements to the parking garage itself. And then on the 5th of October, the contract with Spawn Ranch for the skate park design build was approved by the city council. So that is good news. That is underway. I have made comments to them, as I've mentioned to you in the past, about bringing the design to you at a point where it makes sense for you to have an opportunity to review it and provide comments on that. So as we stand up that project and get them underway, we'll be looking for the right opportunity to bring that to the Harbor Commission for your review and comment. Then upcoming council agenda.
Can I jump in there?
Yeah.
So the thing that I was interested in when that came up is they're going to do the North Redondo side. Was that Perry Park or?
Yes.
Yeah, they're going to do that first, and they were anticipating maybe, I think January they were saying that could be ready. And then the goal was by the time we get ready for next summer that the pier would be done, and they thought they could get that done even earlier than that deadline. So they were pretty lean forward.
Yeah, I mean, I have the staff report here. It says, the comment from the staff report says the agreement anticipates substantial completion of the facilities prior to Memorial Day 2022. So it's interesting. We'll see if they're able to actually move that quickly, but that would be great if we had that amenity available to us next summer for the community to be able to use. So all in all, a good news item. Took a little bit longer than expected just because the city doesn't do a lot of design build contracts. So I think that was actually the long pole in the tent, was trying to get the right contract template put together to do a design build contract with Spawn Ranch. So, but glad that was approved by council and it's moving forward. We do have a couple of upcoming council items. We have an amendment to the Jack Built Master Lease to add a small term onto their existing term. We need to do that to align that master lease with the need to retain the Cheesecake Factory in that space. Cheesecake Factory is looking for 10 additional years. The Jack Built lease would run out prior to the end of that 10 years. So it would be an amendment to their master lease to add about 5 years of term onto that master lease. The advantage of that is it would also then create an expiration date for the Jack Built master lease and the Port Royal master lease at the same time. So that whole corner of the harbor there, from Portofino Way all the way to the Shade Hotel and from Harbor Drive back, would all be coming due at about the exact same time. And so it could present an interesting opportunity down the road for perhaps something at that location, if that's the desire of the council and with your input going forward. So that'll be coming to the city council probably, I'm guessing maybe the first meeting in November. We also have our usual items, things like free holiday parking that's coming to the city council. And so that'll be from December 4th to January 1st. That'll be coming forward. So we've got a few agenda items. The Redondo Beach Tourism District is going to be presenting their annual report to the city council on November 2nd. And so a few interesting items kind of coming their way. Miscellaneous follow-up items. First thing I wanted to report out is that the city clerk's office is going to have orientation for commissioners on October 26th at 6 o'clock. So new appointees, Jim, if you're interested, I know you may have attended this in the past, but you're welcome to attend that. And any other commissioner that either hasn't had a chance to attend orientation, I know it was suspended during COVID, I think for the last round of appointments, or anybody who wants a refresher, I will send it to all of you, the link to attend that orientation. But again, just as you know, it's October 26th at 6 o'clock. And that'll be via Zoom. So we'll send that to you, and you'll also get an updated commissioner's handbook as part of that distribution. Next item is public amenities plan. I think Chair Light mentioned this already. The working group, I think we took a little work to get 11 people and find a common date and time when everybody could meet, but we're going to have our first meeting with the working group on the 18th, a week from today. So that will be from 4 to 6 p.m. virtually for the first meeting, and then we're hoping to transition to in-person meetings for the next meeting if that's possible. So we'll be looking forward to meeting with them. I think they're going to give you a pretty good background on who they are, what they're about, talk a little bit about scope of work, sort of what the expectations are of the working committee, talk about the community engagement strategy, standing up the project website, and then probably as important as anything, talk about a schedule going forward for future working group meetings and for the first public outreach meeting. So that'll be all kind of part of the conversation as part of this initial working group meeting that's going to happen a week from tonight. So we'll look forward to seeing the subcommittee members there and participating in that meeting as well. I know one of the things that they're going to be focusing on and hoping to get some consensus on is their scope of work, included an architectural review of existing resources. And so I think they're going to want to work with the working committee to kind of figure out which of those resources are the ones that they should be evaluating as part of that process. So no homework in advance of the meeting, but you may come away with a little bit of homework at the meeting. So we'll see how that kind of plays itself out. Next on my list is Beach Life Festival. We talked about that, like I said, as part of the public safety update. Overall, a successful event. Comments generally were limited to the extended hours on Sunday. And for some reason, we think it was kind of the climactic conditions on Sunday evening, but sound seemed to travel further Sunday night than the other two nights at the same volume levels. So we're not 100% certain about that. So a little bit of research is happening to kind of figure out what that might have led to that. Dredging update, we're waiting for the regional board to issue the 401 permit. As soon as they do, the Army Corps of Engineers will issue their permit with conditions, which then in turn will inform the plans and specs for the actual work program. So we're certainly hoping we get that anytime. As I mentioned at our last meeting, that window is kind of getting smaller and smaller. So we're hopeful that we get those permits issued out so that we can understand what those conditions will be and get the plans and specs out on the street for prospective vendors to bid on that scope of work. One good news item related to that was we got an email from the Army Corps of Engineers that the Army Corps of Engineers is about to start their environmental assessment for the breakwater repairs. So as you know, they did an assessment of the breakwater to kind of determine the areas where there had been some structural issues associated with primarily scalloping on the outside of the breakwall itself. So they now are going to start to move forward with the environmental assessment. That's the good news item. The bad news item is they still don't have the actual work for the repairs as part of their work program yet. So we're going to kind of have to keep pressing on that issue with them, maybe a little political pressure to see if we can get that into their actual work program. But they are taking at least one more step in the process and doing the environmental assessment. So that is a bit of a good news item that there's one next step being taken relative to that project. Likewise, Yacht Club Way, Harbor Drive intersection, the plans are almost finalized and the Public Works Department has now started reaching out to signal contractors to get quotes for the scope of work. So that's moving forward in the process. Just another good news item, we did get a Falconer update. They were out at the Beach Life Festival. Right now, they are facing some challenges with flying during COVID because they're trying to limit some of the public interaction, but they are out and you may see them early in the mornings and later in the evenings. So that's just an update on that. And then last couple of things, we do have some upcoming events. I mentioned earlier that there is an event called Rocktober. That's happening October 15th through 17th in Seaside Lagoon. It's 11 different tribute bands. There'll be food and drinks there. So that's going to be happening coming up this coming weekend. And then on October 29th from 6 to 8 p.m., the Pier Association is hosting their 4th annual Halloween event. So anybody who's interested in going out and having a little Halloween celebration, you can certainly do that down at the pier from 6 to 8 p.m. If you dress in a costume, you get a free harbor cruise. So want to invite everybody down to that particular event. And then final thought, upcoming meetings. Our next meeting will be on November 8th. And for that meeting, tentatively right now, we have the sea level rise update, which we moved from this meeting to that meeting. We will give you an update on the public amenities plan process. We may have had 1 or 2 working group meetings by then, so we'll be able to give you a more substantive update on how that's progressing. The Public Works Department and the Planning Department need to come to you to talk about the design for a pump station on Portofino Way. The Public Works Department is going to replace the existing pump station that's there today. They have to move it, and as part of that project, there'll be an enclosure for the pump station itself, and that's going to require your consideration of the design of that enclosure. And then the last thing that will be on your agenda is we want to come and talk to you about the parking spaces at Moonstone Park, the parking spaces that line up along the I guess it's the northern edge of Moonstone Park. You may know that Marina Cove, actually, I'm sorry, it's Majestic KHM now. The new owners of the marina have gone in and done pay-by parking spaces throughout their parking area there, which is fine, but it's creating some operational challenges now for the free pay spaces that are there. So we want to come and talk to you about some thoughts related to those parking spaces at your next meeting. Another, what could be another full agenda for your November meeting is kind of what we're anticipating at the moment. So with that, I'll stop and tackle any other questions you may have related to the director's report, and hopefully I can address those for you.
So let me jump in just real quick on that last item that you brought up, the parking. Since it's out in, Mole B, can you make sure Lana Keela knows that that's going to be on the agenda, or because I think they're going to be the most interested because they use those free parking spaces on the weekend and the evenings for workouts. So, and I know they've got a rep on the amenities plan. So
yeah, Moses, yeah.
Related. The other thing, I don't think it's not a referral to staff, but one of the things I think we ought to prep for as a commission and perhaps, as a city is if the infrastructure bill ever gets approved, there's a lot we want to do in the harbor. We had to come up with a list that we're working politically with our representatives to get money earmarked from that to do our harbor. Things that we wouldn't be able to fund otherwise, like perhaps extension of the south breakwall, things like that. I think it would behoove us to get prepared for that and to start the lobbying with Ted Lieu and the right people from the feds. That's all I had. Let's see, Matt, you've had your hand up for quite some time.
Yes, thank you, Chair Light. Director Proud, not sure how much you can really answer this, but my question revolves around the lease extension for the Cheesecake Factory. I know it's a closed session item, but is the only terms being discussed monetary for the lease extension?
No, in fact, actually, it's a fairly simple lease extension. It's really just term. And then the only other thing that we're trying to address as part of that is to rework the parking configuration on that corner because it's really, one, not attractive, and two, not very functional. It ended up at some point, that shade ended up with a block of parking kind of right in the middle, surrounded by the Cheesecake Factory and by Port Royal. And so what we'd like to do as part of this particular lease amendment is clean up the leasehold boundaries relative to the parking area out there. So it's an extension of term and kind of cleaning up the leasehold boundaries related to the parking. It's really limited in scope to kind of just those two items right now.
I bring it up in part because going back quite a few years ago with the shade deal, part of the negotiations was that promenade along the waterfront. And looking forward, we were looking at when the leases were coming due on the next properties in order to be able to include that as part of the lease negotiations. So that's where my thought process was going with all this.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to do, for that to really be workable, they're going to have to do a major remodel or something. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, and I'll just make a short comment so we don't get too deep into the discussion versus report, but absolutely 100% on our radar screen. And frankly, why we're only recommending to the council that they do a 5-year extension. That will allow Jack Built to do their deal with the Cheesecake Factory. And then at the point that becomes that 5-year extension window expires is about the same time that the leasehold for the Port Royal leasehold expires. And it gives us an opportunity to address that entire promenade area in front of their building. If we were to ask them to do that now, we would have had to do a much longer extension because to your point, and
Sure.
100% correct, it's a major rework of the building. And so they are going to put capital improvements into the building as part of the lease extension, but not to the extent that's going to allow that whole rework to happen. So that piece of the puzzle has been kind of deferred until we come back with a much bigger lease extension down the road. So, but that was the whole logic behind having it be a very short extension as opposed to being, say, a 15, 20 or longer lease extension.
So I don't know if the other commissioners are even aware of that kind of, I'm not really going to call it a master plan, but let's call it an amenity that was visioned for the harbor, probably going back, I don't know, 20 years. That may be a little bit more than what it really is, 10, 15 years. The idea of a promenade, a walkable area for the public in front of all the leaseholds around the harbor area.
Mm-hmm.
So the shade, I think, was the first piece of that puzzle.
Yes.
And we were looking for when the rest of the pieces would fall into place.
That's correct.
That's all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Vicky?
Stephen, what year does the lease expire for the Cheesecake Factory?
So our lease is with a company called Jack, who in turn subleases to the Cheesecake Factory. So the lease with the 5-year extension that I'm talking about would expire in 2032, I believe.
Like everybody else.
Yeah, like everybody else. I mean, we've got
Majestic, King Harvey, all of those.
2032, 2033, you have currently, as we sit here today, you have Majestic KHM that expires, you have Port Royal that expires, you now have Jack Built that would expire. There will be property come due at that point in time. And that was also the logic of trying to sync those things all up so that if there's a thought that folks wanted to do something, council wanted to go in a particular direction, that you would have that opportunity with all of these things kind of coming due around the same time.
Sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions for the director's report or comments?
Commissioner Krazan has her hand up, Chair.
Oh, I don't even see her now. Oh, there she is. You got a yellow background, so it doesn't come up really well. Okay, Leslie, you had something?
Thank you. Let's see. I had a question. You said that the first amenities meeting, no homework in advance. I mean, me personally, I do better kind of being prepped to know what the consultants are coming with, and some people have more history than others coming onto that committee. Is there not background information that's already been provided to the consultant?
Other than the background information that was contained in the Dropbox, which I think I've given the link out for that, but they're going to take you through their, one of the things that to kind of get everybody on the same page, because while the chair was on the selection committee, most of the people who are going to be part of the working group may not be as familiar with what their entire scope of work is. So they're going to kind of start you out and let you know, okay, here's the scope of work, here's what the intended work products are. They're going to take you through that process as part of this initial meeting. If there's a particular topic, we're not going to get too deep, I don't think, on any particular design elements as part of this meeting. They may have some general thoughts about going forward, but I think the goal is to really help you understand what the scope of work is they're going to do, talk to you about managing your expectations and making sure that scope aligns with those expectations, talk about the community engagement process, the first public workshop, how we go through that process, standing up the project website, and then, like I said, talking to you a little bit about what kinds of architectural review may be necessary to support their work. That's kind of what they're proposing right now. I'm expecting to get a more formal agenda from them in the next day or so to make sure that that's exactly what's on there. But based on the conversation that we had with them, that's where they're headed relative to the first working group meeting.
Okay, I don't see anything recent from Dropbox. I'm not sure if all the committee members have been sent to Dropbox. But I thought that there was a milestone between the first and second meeting for Moonstone Park, like 50% completion or something like that. So I guess
I'd have to go back and look at their scope to see what that is. So the way we talked with them about kind of the schedule coming up, where we're going, and this is to be discussed much more detail at the working group level, is to have this initial working group meeting happen on Monday. Once that group is together, the expectation is there would be a second working group meeting that will occur. And then following that second working group meeting would be when the first public workshop would occur. And what they do between that first the first working group meeting and the second working group meeting is when I would expect that they're going to actually start working through some deliverables that they would then share with the working group at that second meeting. I don't think they're going to come into this first meeting with a lot of work already completed, in the sense that, they've got pictures to show you or design concepts to share. I think this is to kind of almost more like a kickoff, if you will, to kind of get the group all going in the same direction with some request for input from you, but not to have necessarily materials that would be for you to review in advance of that meeting.
And the second working group meeting is within that first month before.
We haven't scheduled it. I think when we get everybody in the room,
Okay, I'm just trying to understand how there's a milestone due in short order from the schedule you showed at the last month or whenever that meeting was. So I'm wondering how the subcommittee is getting substantially in that conversation. And
sorry to interrupt. I had the same question last month, Director, and I think we realized that was a draft schedule you had published, but not the schedule, not the official schedule from the contractor.
The schedule that we provided you last month was the schedule from the contractor. So we're not
misunderstood.
Independent of the contractor. They're drafting the schedules in their work program related to that. So,
okay.
If that's what
well, I guess I would just ask that whatever's on the Dropbox that that it's provided to the subcommittee so we can prepare as we see fit. And then to that point, this was mentioned earlier about the Harbor Patrol. That schedule showed Molby 50% completion or something like in short order here. And so I would think that the Harbor Patrol would be in that first meeting since they sit there and there's the helipad and those sorts of elements.
Yeah, and the one thing I just want to caution you. So the Moonstone Park conversation, just remember when I brought this up last month, we all had this sense that Moonstone Park was going to be the expedited piece of the puzzle, right? And we're getting conflicting messages from the city council as to whether they want to have the Seaside Lagoon be the more accelerated component of the puzzle. I now think that, and so the dynamic, just so you know, is not 100% set. It's shifting a little bit. And we were expecting that the city council was going to give some direction relative to these two firms that were being recommended so we could get them on board quickly and start the visioning component for Seaside Lagoon. So when I last had the conversation with the consultant, they were starting to pivot, given that particular direction, to be thinking, well, are we going to need to really focus on Seaside Lagoon? Now we've had to bring them back and say, well, guess what? We're not going to have those consultants on board right away. It looks like we're going to have to go through an RFP process for those consultants. So they're going to have to kind of now shift their work program again. So it's a little difficult not knowing exactly what that priority is and how that's going to line up with their schedules. So I think we're going to have to be flexible and fluid till we figure that particular piece out to figure out what is the priority for the council going forward relative to this plan. It's been a little challenging for us as staff and them as the consultant to say, are we really focusing on Moonstone Park and trying to accelerate that? Or are we really trying to accelerate and come up with a visioning program for Seaside Lagoon and get that moving forward as well? So, we're going to kind of get this sorted out as we get this thing stood up and rolling But my only caution would be to you, you have a schedule, but don't quite be so married to it because we're going to probably have to make some adjustments to it as we go. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sounds like that piece might get paused or something.
Yeah.
Let's see. My only personal comment on beach life, I just like 2 years ago, I thought it was managed really well. I unfortunately didn't get to attend this year, but I live very close by, and it's like virtually no, I don't see any impact, which was great. My only big complaint this year was the banner planes that circle directly over my house for 3 and 4 hour stretches every day. And I didn't know if the city or if there's any sort of regulations about that. I did hear a few other people complain about it. Called the FAA. They said no one's here to answer your question until Monday. So that'd be my only feedback, if they can do something a bit different with the banner planes over residential areas. The same residential path.
Was it, I'm just curious, was it advertising the Beach Life Festival, or was it advertising?
Yeah, it was
Yes.
K-Rock welcomes, whatever it was.
So it was K-Rock.
There was a K-Rock and I think a vodka.
Yeah, there was a vodka, one of the sponsors.
So like literally 4 hours in the same flight path. It was bad.
Got it. Okay.
So those are my comments. Thanks.
So just one thing on Director Proud. When I talked with Nils, the Councilman Narenheim, about the kind of bifurcation of their direction, he didn't see any conflict in it. He saw it as a parallel effort, and he still wanted to see Moonstone Park accelerated. So,
well, I guess, and I appreciate that. The problem is we can't accelerate every part of the public event.
I know.
So I mean, that's our challenge, right? I mean, so he might not see the conflict, but he's also not doing the work.
Well, but I tried to lay out to him that you can't, that separate study should be folded in to the amenities plan, because it could determine the size. You may want to expand the park. You may want to shrink. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, and that's the conversation we had with the consultant, and we were sort of, at first we were trying to think it through and say, well, should we set the framework for the rough footprint and then come back and talk about the visioning for what happens in the footprint, or do you want to sort of talk more about the programmatic components and then have that drive some of the shape of the footprint? You could sort of do it either way, right?
Yep. We're in violent agreement. I just wanted to pass that on.
Yeah, we were sort of gearing up for the latter, and then we tried to switch to the former. And now I think unfortunately, I think we're going to find ourselves in between right now, because an RFP process is going to take a little while.
Yep.
And we want to get started. You all are eager to get started and moving this process. And so, it may be that we're going to end up doing some amount of work, and then we'll figure out when they come on board, how we fold them into where we are in the process.
Yeah, and then the only other thing I had was Leslie's request for the shared files.
Yeah.
Mark Hansen said he's trying to find those too. He said he reached out to you, but hadn't gotten a response yet.
Okay, it's curious because I was pretty certain we sent that around, but we will resend it.
Okay.
Yeah, the calendar says Moonstone Park 50% concept end of October.
Yeah, and well, okay, and also remember that,
unless you put a pause on that.
Yeah, and it's taken us just to get the working group meeting scheduled, probably to coordinate everybody's calendars for the working group. We wanted to do it probably 2 weeks ago, and we've been pushed.
Yeah, it's like 2 weeks late. Yeah.
So it's, we're gonna, that's why I'm cautioning you all to be mindful that, we have a schedule and we're gonna try to just continue to make forward progress, but we may not be hitting everything exactly on those dates and in that order right now. We're gonna have to kind of do a little bit of modifications as we get this thing up and running and figure out what we have in front of us and what the priority is.
Okay, any other? It's getting to be 10 o'clock, so I'm conscious of everyone's time. So
I'm glad sea level rise has been postponed.
Yeah.
Also, Stephen, I'm not sure if Mark has a comment, but.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Mark has had his hand up. I apologize, Mark. I assume it's related to the director's report. Mark, you're unmuted. I apologize.
Hello, commissioners. Good evening. Great productive meeting tonight. Just a couple comments on the director's report. Before I do that, I had my hand up earlier when you were talking about the commercial outdoor dining, and one of you mentioned cleaning. If you do a communal area, keeping it clean, and I just want to reinforce that concern. As it is down in the Harbor and Pier area, there are some restaurants there that don't keep their restaurants clean all by themselves. And we're all concerned, over the decades about trying to attract higher socioeconomic actual residents down to the Harbor and Pier area. They're not going to come down. They have to clean filthy tables before they can eat. So whoever made that comment, really great comment. I can tell you when you go to something like the Hermosa Fiesta, where it's communal tables, it is filthy because none of those pop-up restaurants take responsibility. The trash cans are overflowing, and within a couple hours, every table is just covered with grease and mess. So great comment by whoever did that. Anyway, on to the director's report. The director mentioned the Seaside Lagoon revitalization. And of course, one of the things that can be considered in there is a wave generation pool. And I've been a fan of that because I think it's kind of the only component of the an aquatics amenity is directly related, to the ocean where we create young surfers. So just about an hour and a half ago, I met with Randy Maestro and asked if Diamond Surf was still connected with the Wave Generation Company. He says, yes, they absolutely were. And Robbie Maestro would be the best contact for that. So I just want to pass that on to you that, I know we're going to be looking at big aquatics companies, but it would be awfully nice to give our local company a little shot maybe at operating the Wave Generation part of it if we do that. Next thing that was mentioned was the lease for Cheesecake Factory and Jack Built and aligning leases, and then what we could do to coordinate. And I want to remind those who were around and those who weren't that back when we were working on the bike path, one of the things that was brought up was trying to make it as safe as possible. And in fact, the boaters recommended no unregulated cross traffic on the bike path. We were not able to accomplish that. And each and one of those entrances is pretty darn dangerous, even for those of us who are around and know to watch out. The report we had from staff at the time was they brought up the subject to the restaurants, and basically each restaurant wanted their own entrance and wasn't interested in cooperating, to have, say one nice controlled, again, I see the director nodding his head, to have one nice, safe, controlled place, with a real live signal to make sure we don't run over the bicyclers. At any rate, I think you can see my point coming here. As these leases start to come due, I think we should take a look at that, because then the city will have the leverage to go to those restaurants and say, you want a new lease, you're going to have to let us make one single controlled nice entry point. Related to that, there was a discussion about the promenade and Measure G that we passed around, 2010, it provided for a 12-foot walking promenade. Now, that was great, and we all supported it. It's a wonderful thing supported by the state, but things got a little carried away. A couple staff members got on a high about trying to make the one in front of the shade 18 feet wide. And for those who weren't around, I can tell you there was quite some banter between the Harbor Commission and staff on this, and the staff would change their tone back and forth. On one meeting, they'd say, oh no, there's not going to be any bicycles on that. It's just a walking promenade. And then the next thing you know, the way they characterized it would change, and the harbor commissioners would call them on it and say, wait a minute, you said no bikes on that thing. And then they went back and forth. And at one point, the staff drew in some planters, some benches, some trash cans. And I got to tell you that the perception by some of the harbor commissioners was, that this was a little bit of gamesmanship, that they were going to put those things in the extra 6 feet for the time being. But the truth would be that if they ever have the ability to do 18 feet in front of each successive leasehold, then they just take out those temporary things and try to put a bike path in there. So I'm speaking rather candidly, but your predecessors on the Harbor Commission had deep concerns with that in their discussion with staff. So anyway, that's it. Those are my comments. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mark. Vicky, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify one thing that Mark mentioned about clean tables at the Hermosa Fiesta, that the restaurants there in the food court don't clean. It is not their responsibility. The chamber hires an outside company to handle security, setup, and cleanup. And they hire the people to empty the trash and do all that. So it has nothing to do with the restaurants. Just a clarification.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. Okay, on to L6, which is nominations and elections of chairperson and vice chair. Since it's getting late, if you're okay, Director Proud, I'm just going to start this off.
Knock yourself out.
Okay, so this is my last meeting as chair. We're due to select the new chairperson and vice chair. Our tradition has been to go by longevity. So I'm going to start the nominations and then we'll make a motion. It's Roger's turn to step up to be chair, so I would nominate him to be chair. And from discussions with Director Proud, Steve Walters and Tom Bauer both came on in the same meeting, so they'd both be eligible as next in line. I emailed with both of them over the weekend, and I think both Steve's preference and Tom supports it is that Tom be the nominee for the vice chair for this time. Well, I will make those two nominations.
Second.
Okay. Any other nominees or?
You didn't email me, Jim.
That's because you're in. You don't have a choice. Leslie, looked like you wanted to say something. No. Okay. Can I'll make the motion then that
it's already moved and seconded.
Oh, that's right. You're right. It's late. I'm losing my mind. So we got to move in a second. No discussion. So let's call the vote. Can we get a roll call vote?
Yeah, roll call vote is Commissioner Carlson.
Do I need to abstain?
No.
Reluctantly in favor.
Commissioner Bauer.
Yeah.
Commissioner Walters.
Yes.
Commissioner Grazan.
Yes.
Commissioner Kilroy.
Yes.
Commissioner Callahan.
Yes.
And for the last time, Chair Light.
Yes.
Last time.
So,
and before we jump to the next one, since I'll turn it over to Roger, I do want to thank everybody. This has been it went fast and it's all been Zoom, no in-person meetings, but really appreciate the rapport of all the commission members and all the city staff and Director Proud. I really appreciate the rapport we've developed, and I really am pleased with the more inclusiveness that the city's done with the commission members. So hopefully you viewed us as lifting more of our weight and taking some work off your hands, not just adding to your workload. So with that,
yeah, absolutely, Chair Light. Thank you. I appreciate the work you've done. You know, all the work and the creating the subcommittee culture and kind of getting people out and participating in the selection process for the public amenities plan. You know, there's been a lot of work that the commission has done over the last 12 months under your leadership. So we really appreciate it as staff. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been a fun year. So with that, Roger, I'm turning it over to you for the final agenda item.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
No.
We got referrals.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Referrals to staff. I'll go through as I see them. Vicky.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Stephen, for the update on the Harbor Drive Yacht Club Way and the dredging. Those were all my questions. The one question I have is, could we have an update on the vacancies and Gold's Gym at the next meeting?
Yeah. I'm not sure how much I'll have to report, but I'll give you a little update on it. Sure.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay.
And happy Halloween.
Continuing through as I see people on the screen, Jim, any referrals to staff?
No, thank you.
Tom, any referrals to staff?
No, well, yes, just one item, which is you're doing a seismic look at the parking structure. I noticed some in that one email we got from the chef. He was talking about a structural, how sound the area is above the international boardwalk there. He was mentioning that there were leaks in all the restaurant. Is there any plans to take a look at how structurally sound that area is?
It's not in the current scope of work for the garage component, so that would have to be a kind of a separate scope of work. We do go out on a case-by-case basis and kind of look at some of the issues. Like, for example, we just had a structural engineer go out and look at an area right above Naja's where we noticed there had been some damage. So we are kind of monitoring it for damage and where we have leaks, we're looking at it. But right now, we don't have a scope of work contemplated for kind of a comprehensive structural evaluation of that space. I think it's certainly something we could look at. It'd probably have to be a budgeted item, say maybe in the next budget cycle. But that could be a recommendation from the Harbor Commission, perhaps as part of the next budget cycle, to ask for a structural evaluation of the spaces along the International Boardwalk.
Right.
I think that the question that was raised by El Baja Chef, we have to just, we've been operating with tables and chairs and people up there, and we probably aren't even anywhere close to what the load requirements would be up there, given the scope and scale of that plaza area. So we're not too terribly concerned about the issue he raised relative to the outdoor dining space. But if the question is kind of a larger question just about the structural integrity of those spaces, we'd have to bring on our engineer to have us take a look.
I guess my concern was when he mentioned up that essentially all the restaurants have water leaks, and certainly if somebody has a water leak, that should get it repaired immediately. I mean, if you have a water leak for very long at all, I assume it's wood up in that area, right?
Actually, the issue is it's not, and in some areas, what we're getting is we're getting weeping through the concrete.
Okay.
So, and when we get reports, we do send our public works crews out there and we try to determine the source of the leak. And if we can repair it, we do. But it is challenging just because that's built into the embankment and it's almost like it's a retaining wall. And so as we get moisture built up, it's almost like if you have a house with a retaining wall, you get moisture build up behind it. Sometimes there'll be areas where that water will weep through the walls and create a leak inside of the building. So that's been our biggest challenge, is kind of the integrity of the concrete and the ability for the water to weep through that space.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks. Commissioner Walters, any referrals to staff?
No, thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Kilroy, any referrals?
I'm good. Thank you.
And Commissioner Kazan.
None, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. With that, we are on to the final item. I was jumping the
Commissioner
gun.
Carlson, and I don't mean to interrupt. Does that mean you don't have any referrals either?
I don't have any either. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. We are adjourned until, I forget when, November
8th.
8th. Yes, thank you very much.
6:30.
All of you.
Congratulations, Roger and Tom.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. We'll see you all in a month.
Good night.
Happy Halloween.
Good night. Thank you.
You too.
Everyone.
All right.